各位同事
Colleagues, we've already passed the scheduled starting time and we've just formed a quorum. I now call the meeting to order. I'd like to invite members to confirm 2 sets of minutes. Paper CB bracket 1926, stroke 1314. Minutes of the special meeting held on the 16th of November 2013. And then paper CB bracket 1927, stroke 1314. Minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of December 2013. Up to this moment, the Secretariat has not received any proposal for amendment. Members, any comments? If there are no comments, I'll have the minutes confirmed. Information papers issued since the last meeting. We received a number of information papers after the last meeting. The details have already been set out in the agenda. Members, any special comments on the information papers? If not, we proceed to the next item on the agenda. Our next meeting will be held on the 25th of March, Tuesday, at 2:30 p.m. The administration has proposed the following 5 items for discussion. PWP item numbers 401DS, 402DS, and 195WC. Feasibility study on relocation of Shamcheng sewage treatment works to caverns, relocation of Saikong sewage treatment works to caverns, and relocation of Diamond Hill freshwater and saltwater service reservoirs to caverns. Number 2, PWP item number 399DS, relocation of Shatien sewage treatment works to caverns. Number 3, PWP item number 768CL, strategic studies for artificial islands in the central waters. Number 4, PWP item number 770CL, planning, engineering and architectural study for topside development at Hong Kong Boundary Crossing Facilities Island of Hong Kong Zhuhai Macau Bridge. And number 5, revision of fees for services under the purview of the Buildings Department. In order that we have time to discuss all these items, I suggest that the next regular meeting be extended for another 2 hours up to 6:30 p.m. Members, any other comments? Mr. Chairman, I have no special comments on the agenda and the extended schedule. However, I'd like to say that very often this panel has a long agenda with many discussion papers. So if possible, I'd like to have the papers earlier. I just discovered that we only received the papers shortly before the meeting. And in fact, the agenda items are equivalent to the number for 2 meetings. All right, we'll take note of that. Next item on the agenda, challenges to delivery of the Capital Works program. Would you please invite the government officials to enter the conference room? First of all, I'd like to welcome the government representatives. The name list has already been tabled. I won't introduce them one by one. Now, I'd like to invite the government representatives to brief us on this item. The administration will use a PowerPoint presentation to brief us on the item. So please be as concise as possible. Thank you, Chairman. Although you asked that we be concise, I understand that we normally have 10-odd minutes for PowerPoint presentation. This time I'll have to spend longer on that because in recent times the government and the construction industry have done a lot. So I'd like to take this opportunity to take you through more details. After my introductory remarks, if members have comments on individual subject matters, I would be happy to elaborate in more details. For quite some time, we applied to LegCo for supplementary funding on a number of major projects, and councillors and members of the public were concerned whether or not there is this bunching effect with high construction costs and whether or not there is a shortage of manpower in the construction industry. So today I'd like to go through three aspects. First of all, infrastructure investment. Secondly, forecast on public and private projects. Number 3, challenges. Number 4, measures to cope with the situation, and finally the estimation of construction costs. Infrastructure, I don't think I need to say too much about that. Infrastructure development is very important to Hong Kong. All along, by launching infrastructure projects, the government has tried to maintain our economic development. I'll first look at the construction industry and its relationship with Hong Kong GDP. From this slide, you can see that the blue line represents Hong Kong's GDP growth. The pink line represents the construction industry share in GDP. You can see the percentages there. In the 1970s and 1980s, when we developed our new towns, the percentage stood at 60 to 70%. But then by the 1990s, as you can see, for quite some time, the line is rather flat at around 6 to 7%. That's with the 10 major projects. And then by 2007-08, dropping to 2.7%. And then in 2007-08, we launched the 10 major infrastructure projects. The line rise again. And then by the end of 2013, for the overall construction industry in the public and private sectors, they take up around 3.6% of the GDP. So in the past 2 to 3 decades, the percentage has been dropping continuously. How do we compare with our neighboring jurisdictions? Now on this chart, you can see a number of lines. For example, Singapore, the orange line, you can see that as the Financial Secretary said in his blog, in the past 8 to 10 years, Singapore invested hugely on its hardware, boosting its economic growth, including major reclamation. Even for Macau, or extensive reclamation for Macau, at its peak, construction industry amounted to 11% of its GDP in terms of the gambling industry and the tourism industry. And for Shanghai, Australia, and Japan, they also recorded a higher percentage than Hong Kong. So to maintain our competitiveness, it is necessary for us to appropriately invest in our hardware and to maintain that at a reasonable level. We'll first look at the public sector, the public works program. Well, what's our investment like? From this chart, you can see that starting from the 1990s, at every stage, we had rather huge infrastructure projects. The new airport project, and then the 8 major projects, and then in 2007, another 10 major infrastructure projects. And the annual expenditure rose from around $30 billion in the 1990s to around $70 billion in the next few years. Here, I'd like to particularly mention that these are actual expenditure. As for the volume of work depends on inflation, rise in material costs, etc. So the actual expenditure of $70 billion and $30 billion cannot compare directly, because the volume of works have to take into account the rise in commodity prices, manpower costs, etc. So you see that here we see a rather stable rise, but after considering inflation and commodity price increases, it's actually a drop. That is, from 2007 to 2008, our investment in hardware was actually dropping rather than remaining stable. Of course, all along, the administration would like to, in an orderly manner, launch major projects. But sometimes we did encounter unforeseeable scenarios like legal challenges, judicial reviews, and for the high-tech development areas, we went through repeated planning processes with a rather long consultation exercise. So the whole project was delayed. As a result, there's this unnecessary fluctuation in project expenditure. After looking at the public sector expenditure, I'd like to go to the overall forecast for the construction industry. From this chart, you can see that the actual volume of works represents the actual expenditure, public and private sectors together. And then after 2012-13, that's our forecast. There are two lines, one optimistic, one conservative. You can see that upcoming, the volume of works will be maintained at a high level, depending on the progress of individual projects. If progress is smooth, we'll be nearer to the optimistic line. If there are more challenges, we may be nearer to the conservative line. But we'll be talking about $170 to $200 billion. That is overall speaking, including public and private sectors. And we worked this out together with the CIC. And starting from March last year, we formally made known these statistics to the industry to facilitate planning. And we now see the forecast for the next 12 years. But we've excluded new developments like those in NT North, Lantau development, and so forth. If we take into account those projects, we believe that the future expenditure of the construction industry in the public and private sectors will be maintained at quite a high level. How did we produce these forecasts? For the public sector, the forecast is easier, including the capital works program of the government, including those underway and those already budgeted, and strategic development studies, and those with a preliminary budget. It also includes other public bodies like the Housing Authority, MTRC, Hospital Authority, and so forth. The third runway, for example, is also included. Repair and maintenance works are also included. As for the private sector, how did we produce the forecasts? We looked at our land sales records, the submission of construction plans, market information, and forecast on our GDP. When we produce these forecasts from the private sector, for the private sector, the forecast would not be as accurate as that for the public sector. As I said just now, in the next 10 years, we believe that the volume of works will maintain at a high level between $160 to $190 billion. Now, from this chart, you can see that projects that are worthwhile, if we are to delay them, there's not much room for delay. Because if we do so, the peak will only be delayed, leading to a more acute shortage in manpower, and construction costs will rise further. Therefore, here I'd like to mention one very important point. That is, we must timely and continuously, in accordance with our plan, invest in our hardware infrastructure. Now, I'd like to turn to the challenges facing the construction industry. I'll mention three aspects.
First of all, manpower in the construction industry, project costs, and the major infrastructural projects. Regarding manpower in the construction industry, right now our unemployment rate is at a very low level. Wages are going up, and we've also have the mismatch of skills as well as the aging of the workers. According to the figures for last quarter, unemployment rate is at 4.1%. Regarding, well, we've looked at 3 surveys. The first one conducted by the Census and Statistics Department, which is the household survey, and also the construction trade union and the CIC. The CIC actually made 70,000 telephone calls and obtained detailed information from workers. Based on such information, we found out that workers on average will work for 5 days in a week, and some even work for 6 days in a week. Given that the industry is very labor intensive, if workers work for about 5 days in a week, you would realize that if we only relied on the existing labor pool, we'll not be able to resolve the problem of the manpower shortage. As for wages, according to the Census and Statistics Department, the median monthly income has gone up by about 33% since the year 2009. And we are experiencing manpower shortage in more than 20 categories of work, such as iron benders and concreters and so on. The daily wage is now up to $1,500, and they're making more than $30,000 in a month. But it's not just the construction workers whose median wage is going up. According to the CNS department, the employers at below the rank of supervisors, that is those at the rank and file level, such as those working for property management and the catering industry, wages have gone up by 27%. So employees below the level of supervisors have seen their wages gone up in a comparable manner. What are the implications of the aging of the construction workforce? Since 2007, we've been able to obtain information regarding the age profile of the workers. Among the registered workers, 40% of them are over the age of 50. Skill mismatch means that of the 30,000 workers, only 35% of them are skilled or semi-skilled workers. The rest are just unskilled workers. And here, in this PowerPoint, you'll find that there's changes in the percentage for infrastructures and construction production. And in 2009, household construction, building construction 60%, infrastructure 40%, but now infrastructure take up 70%. So therefore, we're experiencing acute shortages of some types of workers. So if we fully implemented the workers registration scheme, we hope that members will be able to acquire more skills, and that would really help create a healthier development for the industry. And next, I'd like to briefly talk about the question of material cost. Since all construction materials are imported, and therefore we are affected by the global commodity changes in the global commodity prices, and we can take a look at the material costs to serve, the construction costs, and the tendering prices. Now, after the financial tsunami, major economies have adopted a easy money policy, and as a result, prices have started to go up. So in 2011, while prices of materials have stabilized, but they still stay at a very high level. The major construction costs the materials have gone up by 12 to 43%. And because of that, and given the rising labor cost, for the construction costs have gone up for different categories of works. For government offices, for example, from 2009 to 2013, for different types of construction costs, they have gone up on average by 60%. For roads and drainage works, 25%. Tendering prices. So in the building works tender price index, it was at its lowest in 2009, and so far it has gone up by 59% already. Of the 59% increase, we can have a further breakdown, and we'll find that construction material cost has gone up by 31% since 2009, wages up by 33%. Construction materials and labor costs, however, only make up 50 and 35% respectively of the total construction costs. So the rising material costs and labor wages only make up about 25% of the total increase in construction cost. As I said, the index has gone up by 59%. For example, the risk premium have also gone up, especially for mega capital works projects. For the risk premium, I think something has gone wrong with the risk premium. For mega capital works, because the works period tends to be longer, and they are more subject to the impact of the business cycles. Furthermore, these are more complex projects, and the number of contractors who can undertake such mega projects are not that many, and all these factors have represented major costs for the rising construction costs. In the face of such challenges, the construction industry and the government have come up with a number of measures to cope with the challenges. And I'll briefly highlight the work that we've done. And they're divided into 3 areas: manpower supply, review of the procurement system, and finally providing more transparent information for the industry. On manpower supply, in this pie chart, you'll find that we have 330,000 registered workers, of which 70,000 have already left the construction industry. We estimate that there are about 10,000 unemployed and 17,000 are underemployed. So these figures are actually, a summary arrived at after the CIC has conducted a survey, and also the CNS department has conducted its surveys. Regarding the taking into consideration the number of registered workers, the projected volume of work, number of workers who retired, and so on, we predict that for the next 4 years there will be a shortage of about 30,000 construction workers, of which 20,000 are skilled workers. Given such a shortage, back in 2008 we started to plan improvement measures, and I think members will recall that in 2010 and 2012 we applied for funding of $320 million for the training of local workers and also for promotion. The training included increasing the number of training places. The CIC was able to train 2,000 people in 2009. Now they're able to train 8,000. And they've also have the enhanced manpower training scheme. I think you probably have heard of the so-called 80-15 system. That is, during the period of training, the workers will receive a subsidy of allowance of $8,000. Upon completion, they will be paid guarantee wages. So we also have a training scheme which we carried out by in conjunction with the contractors, and the trainees are guaranteed a job even before they complete the training. And such schemes have attracted young people to join the construction industry. In these training schemes, 55% of the trainees are below the age of 35. For those who are already working, we have come up with a number of improvement measures. For example, the skill test allowance. This is for serving workers and helping them enhance the skills. And for the veterans, we have special training programs, and also there are skill enhancement courses for those people who do not perform so well during the test. For the seasoned workers, we also have training courses for them to help them be promoted to work supervisors and so on. We also have a promotion plan in 2011 to enhance the image of the construction industry. And since then, we've conducted a tracking study. In 2011, we found out that for those between the age of 15 and 24, less than 8% are willing to join the construction industry. A recent study showed that more than 20% of young people are willing to join the construction industry. So such efforts have proved to be successful. Of course, training alone cannot resolve the problem. There are limitations because we may not have sufficient venues and instructors. And also, it is true that the construction industry requires a lot of hard work, and some trainees do leave after they finish complete training. And also, and it takes a long time to train these skilled workers. And the workers, after completing the training, will have to go through 2 to 4 years, work for 2 to 4 years before they become skilled workers. Given the tight labor situation, it's difficult for us to find sufficient number of skilled workers to help us with the in-service training for construction workers. Other than training, we've also adopted other measures. We want to make optimal use of the potential labor supply. For example, job matching. We have launched a website by which employers and employees can register on the website when a vacancy arises. And given that we know the skill profile of the workers, if there is a job that suits the job profile, the skill profile of that worker, we will inform that worker about such a vacancy. Also, we work together with the trade to organize major recruitment seminars, and we also set up a construction industry information center, so the people who want to receive training and so on will be able to obtain the relevant information at that center. Having considered the number of registered workers and also some workers who have left, and there are also some unemployed workers, while we try hard to attract these people to join the construction industry through training and also make optimal use of the potential labor supply, we found out that by 2017, if we want to complete all the capital works projects, there is still a shortfall. The green portion here represents the shortage. For the next 4 years, we expect that we are short. There will be a shortage of 20,000 workers. We therefore believe that there is a need to make good use of the supplementary labor scheme. At the end of last year, we went to the LAB and gave a detailed briefing. The LAB, having heard our presentation, agreed that we should make optimal use of this scheme, and there is room for us to sort of streamline the approval process. We're now working with the department and the trade and we are reviewing the procedure. We hope that in March we will be able to go back to the LAB again and brief them on the proposed streamlined procedure, so that the industry can make use of the scheme to import a sufficient number of workers. Other than training, we also have adopted measures to increase mechanization. We're working together with the trade to build up a mechanical iron bending plant to relieve the shortage of iron benders in the industry. Other than workers, professionals, work supervisors, and technicians, we are working with the CIC. We are conducting an estimate of the supply and demand of such professionals, and the report for that study will be completed by the second quarter of this year. Other than manpower supply, we have also reviewed our procurement system. For example, we will further implement the 3S concept, the first S being standardization, secondly simplification, and thirdly single integrated element. Recently, in fact last year, the building department and the housing department both reviewed the design for reinforced concrete works, and so that they were able to save, make some savings on manpower. During the tendering stage, we would encourage the contractors to come up with mechanized mechanical methods to make up for the shortage of labor. We are also promoting a new work project, the NEC, the new engineering contract. The concept here is that we jointly manage the risk, and it's not only for the contractor to bear all the risks. When the risk arises, both parties will deal with them together, and that can help lower the cost. At the same time, we have also adjusted the requirements for the contractors on the list, and we also will spread up the major projects into smaller projects so that more contractors can participate in these major infrastructural projects. Finally, our information. Since March last year, the Development Bureau and the CIC jointly made a projection of the capital works project for both the public and private sector, and they include infrastructural projects and so on. We divided them into works for the private and public sectors. Finally, the estimate of the cost of such works. There are two areas here. First of all, how do we make such projections, and how did our previous projections fare? Projection of the cost. Basically, there are three parts. First of all, the basic estimate that is based on the previous tender prices. We will estimate the construction costs, the labor costs, material costs, and the cost for engaging consultants. So this is based on the previous, contract prices. It's certainly not 100% accurate, and there's a need for some adjustment. Next, the work contingency funds, and again, the estimate is based on the prices of similar projects in the past, and this estimate would only be valid until the current prices. Once work starts, the work starts, there might still be further changes in the prices of materials and so on. And therefore, we've also added a price adjustment element, so that in case prices of materials and labor costs goes up after the works have started. And adding the three together will give us the money of the day price. Within our department, we would require them to set up a vetting committee to review the estimate for the mega capital work projects, and we would also require the department to set up a unit price database to help us make our projections.
What are the reasons for an increase in the APE? Now, the basic estimate normally remains unchanged, and problems usually arise with regard to the contingencies, because there may be more works needed during the while the works are being carried out. Also, after works commence, there may be further changes in wages and material costs, and also the tender prices returned by the contractors. So they may differ because of the risk. Estimates are different from ours. When we come up with the APE, what are our track records? So I have some brief statistics here. From this diagram, you can see that there are several estimates. At the inception stage, or when the feasibility study is completed, then we have a preliminary project estimates. The second estimate is when the project is mature, and then we upgrade the project to category A. We come up with another estimate is more accurate. The third estimate has to do with the actual expenses incurred after the works have been completed. The second estimate is more accurate than the preliminary estimate, but then there may be a difference of, say, 10 years between these two estimates. So the difference can be very large between these two estimates. Let's look at the accuracy of the estimates for category A projects. We have looked past the records in the 10 legislative years from 2003 to 2004 and 2012 to 13. There are some 600 projects, and they involved around $62 billion, and among them, around 70 of them, we need to come back to apply for additional funding, and that at a total of 21 billion were involved, i.e. around 1/10 of the projects we need to obtain extra funding, and that accounts for 3.4% of the total project costs. Let's look at the projects completed. For category A projects, in the 5 legislative years from 2003 and 2008, there were some 330 projects completed involving $100 billion. And 14 of them, we need to apply for extra funding of $8 billion from the electrical. For other projects, there was underspending. So for these 330 projects, well, and the actual cost needed is actually lower than envisaged. So we have managed to save up to $13 billion for these projects. So our capability to make estimates is quite good, I can say. But for individual projects, they may differ because there may be overspending in some and underspending in others. For highway projects, we did a benchmark study. We asked an Oxford University professor to help us out with this study, and this professor was an expert in looking at project estimates He was an authority in the field, and he has looked at some 800 projects in over 30 countries. And we've asked him to take a look at our highway projects, how we fare in our project estimates. And his conclusion is that Hong Kong is faring better than other districts. So in conclusion, first, we want to maintain Hong Kong's competitiveness and economic growth. We must implement projects in an orderly manner and continuously. We want to improve the cost effectiveness of our projects, and we are now conducting 2 studies. And the first one is the cost components of construction works. And we are also working with contractors to carry out a survey on contractors' tendering considerations so that we can make better estimates in the future. Chairman, so much for my presentation today. Thank you very much, Permanent Secretary. It's now question time by members. I suggest that members be allowed 4 minutes to speak, including answers and questions. Please be succinct in your questions. Those who have indicated the wish to speak: Chen Kam Lam, Chen Hak Ken, Lee Chek Yan, Lo Wai Kwok, Yu Si Wing, Kwok Ka Kay, Sit Ho, Wu Chi Wai, and Vice Chairman. Chen Kam Lam. Thank you, Chairman. Hong Kong's economic development requires the support of infrastructure projects. There are several tables here with figures. I think more should be said on them. Let's take a look at the slides 7 and 8, the contribution of construction sector to the GDP. It's all along been on the low side, but more importantly, we have to look at the absolute amount in terms of the expenditure. I think over the past decade, the amount should have risen continuously. It might not be proportional to the growth in the GDP. Now, also compared to neighboring economies, I think it's difficult to compare Hong Kong, which is a small economy, and compare it with a country like Singapore and other big countries. Direct comparison can be made. Their GDP is much higher than ours. Our GDP is comparatively smaller in amount. So we should not be saying that since the contribution, the construction sector is contributing to a low GDP, and we have to pay a lot of attention to it. There's no need for us to do so. And also, for many major infrastructure projects, they are subject to legal challenges. For example, in the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge project, there was a judicial review, and the costs have soared as a result. And correspondingly, many other projects are seeing surging costs as well. So in terms of the challenges listed out in manpower resources and challenges posed by rising material costs and so on, apart from these challenges, what about other internal factors on what areas where improvement can be made? For example, can we shorten the consultation period for major projects so that the works can commence as soon as possible? For example, we are talking about NENT development project, and also the Southeast Kowloon project. Well, discussions have been going on for over a decade already. And we are also worried that for NENT project, we'll continue to discuss it for another 10 years. And if that is the case, that will hamper our economic development and will pose problems to housing supply, and also the construction costs may also rise as a result. Administration, what measures do you have to tackle these challenges? Please be succinct in your reply. For GDP, it's just one of the indicators. But then it goes to show that that we are not investing enough in our hardware. Now, as for internal factors, we hope that in the future we can do more advanced works before we launch the public consultation for our major projects. And I hope that the electrical members can support us in our funding application for advanced works, and so that we can have better information when we come to consulting the public. Mr. Chen Hakan, I would like to refer the Permanent Secretary to paragraph 35 in the paper. Two major reasons for overspending, material costs and rising wages. But then if you look at paragraph 35, these two factors contribute to around 15.5% and 11.6% respectively in the increased total project costs. One factor, major factor, is really due to an increase in risk premium. I don't know what this is about. What do you mean by risk premium? And if risk premium is on the rise, does the administration have any measures to cope with that increase? Now, if you don't have such measures, we will still be seeing overspending continuously, and you will be coming back time and again to seek electrical's approval in additional funding. I think you should put in a better mechanism to monitor costs. Second question. And you have said you have introduced a new contract model. After that model has been introduced, is there still overspending on some of the projects? Now, if there is going to be overspending in the future, what is the share of the government in the overspending under this new model? Mr. Chen Hakan said that material costs and wage take up only 59% of the increase in the total costs. Now, for the contractors, they may build in a risk premium to cushion them against a risk, and if they have to do that, they may have to buy more materials, hire more people, and so on. So the way to deal with it is, first, is to split up the major projects into smaller projects. The risk then can be minimized. Second, we will try to share out the risk together with the contractors. That's the purpose of the NEC model. And under this NEC model, there is also a risk-sharing mechanism. Say if the government and the contractors share in the risk, and if the actual cost involved is lower than the project estimate and the gain is netted, then both parties can share the gain as well. Now, say if conversely the actual cost is higher than the tender price, then the government will also show the part or small part of the extra cost. So we hope through this mechanism, the contractors can work together with the government to reduce the risk and share the risk. And we will try to prevent the current situation where we are having all sorts of debates on the risk-sharing work. Well, is it true that under the NEC, whether there is net gain or net loss, would that be shared out on a 50-50% basis? Or for each individual projects, the percentage is different? Well, it is decided upon by the government. For the trial projects, we are using a 50% in the gain share, and for the loss share, then the government will show the 10% only. But everything depends on the scale of the project, and it's up to the government to make the decision on the percentage share. Mr. Lee Cheuk-yan. Thank you, Chairman. I'm also, of course, concerned about workers. Recently, I talked to my labor union, and the XRL section of the MTRCL is starting to sack workers in Pat Hung, in Kwai Chung areas. If you look at all these tables, Mr. Y must admit that the peak of the construction work is already gone. Now, you have both a conservative and optimistic estimates. For the estimates made in the end of 2013, if you are taking an optimistic estimate, it will be going upwards, the line. And well, let's look at slide 42. It also includes the manpower requirements. Now, if you look at slide 42, for the conservative estimate, there is also a optimistic estimate, but then the demand is rising. The broken dotted blue line is going downwards, whereas the red dotted line for the workers is going upwards. So is your demand calculated based on the more optimistic estimate or the conservative estimate? I think the conservative estimate should work better because there are always delays in projects, and so the reasons are open to all sorts of interpretation. But I would like to pose this question. Is it the peak of the construction works is already gone? If that is the case, then we don't have to import too many workers. But then you seem to tell us that we need to import a lot of workers to the tune of 10,000 in number. So if that is the case, then that is going to affect local workers. I am sure that local workers' wages are bound to be affected. Well, it's the same rationale as saying whether the cooling measures are going to affect property prices. Definitely, there's going to be impact. Now, if workers are going to be imported, how will the local workers' wages be affected? Nobody knows. So is it the case that the peak of the construction works is already gone? Now, second, I've received young people's complaints about this. Now, even if I have undergone training provided by CIC, and I started out in a construction work site as a general worker, and I'm not a skilled worker, and no masters are training me up as to become a skilled worker. So why can't the training be done by the private construction companies? First question. The demand is calculated based on an optimistic estimate. Now, as for the supply of workers, the actual number of workers is calculated based on the number of workers in service and minus those who have retired, who have left the job, or who have gone to other places to work. And that we would arrive at an ultimate figure. We also take into account the number of workers in need or required by Macau. And also we will try to make our best efforts to attract potential workers back to the industry. Say for retired workers, aged workers, we might have difficulties in attracting them to rejoin the workforce. So after taking into account all these factors, we come up with a demand line, which is the red line. I know that I'm running out of time. I can wait to speak in the second round. But then it seems that the demand is calculated based from an optimistic perspective. So I don't think this approach works. Now, tomorrow, the media may report that Hong Kong is in need of some 20,000 workers, but then this number is arrived at an optimistic estimate. But that number will be very different if you take the conservative approach. What we meant by taking an optimistic approach is that we would proceed with all the projects proposed, and that has not even included the latest projects proposed in the 2014 policy address. And when we take into account those projects, the number will again be different. It will be higher. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. For the chart about the projection of manpower, because we are facing manpower shortage, we will not be able to have sufficient manpower to cope with the planned projects. So perhaps the Permanent Secretary can elaborate more on some other occasions. Since I assumed office as electrical member, I've heard many comments or power presentations presented at various panels. This was the PowerPoint presentation which we had listened to with the most patience.
This is a relatively more comprehensive review. Of course, it is not deep enough, so to speak, because of time constraints. As a member of the engineering sector, I have to say that even if you are to produce a longer presentation, you'll not be able to cover all challenges and opportunities in the construction industry. Your presentation is desirable. Of course, just now we're told that Hong Kong cannot compare directly with other economies, but we shouldn't slight ourselves. In terms of volume, we can compare with many countries and big cities, and in terms of quality and quantity, we're of world class. And earlier, the media reported that in the past 10 years, the volume of work approved by the LegCo amounted to $620 billion. And then they asked me, Dr. Low, would it be too much? Looking at our contribution to the GDP, that's not an overestimation. Of course, the Permanent Secretary particularly mentioned the contribution to economy, but we also contributed to people's livelihood. All government projects contribute to people's livelihood. So we're important to people's livelihood. So we should stabilize the volume of work rather than coming up with a bunching effect. The procurement system is really interesting. For the mega project, it is suggested that it be broken down into smaller contracts with a 24-month pilot period. The Liantang Hengyuan Wai project was also broken up into smaller contracts before retendering, and eventually were able to save more. I think today we don't have sufficient time for the Permanent Secretary to give us more details. Another Permanent Secretary mentioned the NECs, the new engineering contracts. I think this approach is worthy of further elaboration on another occasion if we don't have enough time today. That approach will be able to reduce risk in terms of construction costs. And that approach will also foster a better relationship with the contractors. Perhaps the Permanent Secretary can respond to the NEC issue. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank Dr. Lo Wai Kwok for his comments. I think after the meeting, I can prepare another paper on the arrangements and considerations on NEC. I really have to commend the Permanent Secretary. These information should have been shared with us at appropriate times on the part of the government. It seems that we've forced this paper out of them. Anyway, this paper is a very important one. Mr. Yu Si-wing? Thank you, Chairman. In page 38, it said that we need 30,000 odd workers covering 20 odd job types. In the past, had such inadequacies caused slippage in our projects. You have identified the problem. Have you identified solutions to resolve this possible slippage as a result of shortage of manpower? In the report just now, it is clear that the administration understands very well the causes of rising construction costs. Contingency, material costs, labor costs are all causes. For the new broadcasting house, Lantang Heng Yunwai project and so forth, we had seen soaring construction prices. Can we have a new tendering system so as to guard against such rises? Permanent Secretary, first of all, I have to emphasize that this 30,000 odd workers have not included training to attract workers to come back to join the construction industry and so forth. If you include those factors, we're only talking about a shortage of 10,000 workers. Of course, this figure may change. As I said just now, every 6 months we'll review the progress of our projects as well as these figures. As for each and every project, are there labor shortages? Yes. According to reports submitted to us, there were already claims for compensation as a result of labor shortage. The government has already received such cases. So how are we going to resolve this manpower shortage? We would like to duly make use of the Supplementary Labor Scheme, the SLS. Each and every project, in accordance with its own needs, can lodge applications. We did discuss with the LAB, and I would like to shorten the time for submission of applications and information. As I said, we'll discuss with the LAB again in March. As for estimation, as I said, estimates cannot be 100% accurate. Otherwise, we don't need to tender in order to quote a construction cost. For the overall public works program, there may be underestimation or overestimation, but overall speaking, for the public works program, our estimates have been quite accurate. But then the NEC approach can't resolve this accuracy or otherwise of estimates. That's only for risk sharing and risk management, such that we can reduce the final construction costs. Mr. Chairman, let me go back to my first issue, that is claims. If the administration has the statistics, please prepare a paper for us for reference. As for estimates for these projects, there may be deviations, but then we have to bear all the actual costs. The Permanent Secretary mentioned only 10%. If we overspend by $10 billion, the government will only be responsible for $1 billion, and the remaining $9 billion will come under the contractors, right? Well, the estimate is only for funding application. We'll reserve a sum of money for the project concerned, but the estimates can't be completely accurate. We have to tender, and during the construction period, due to various reasons, there may be variations. So the estimate is just a reserve of funding for the project. The actual cost will depend on the actual expenses after tendering. If the actual costs are lower, then we have a surplus. If the actual costs are higher than the estimates, we'll have to come back to LegCo for supplementary funding. Next, Dr. Kwokaki. Mr. Chairman, the government said that recently the overspending has been relatively lower, but the new broadcasting house, the Central Wan Chai bypass, and the Lantang Heng Yunwai projects had surprised us. Well, the consultants or the contractors can take whatever they want. They just put up a tendering price, and the resultant cost will be borne by the government. The engineering sector or the contractors may submit a lower bid and then claim damage from the administration later. For the 10 major infrastructure projects, we're talking about $70 billion. Has the government made some adjustments? Costs have been rising. For example, skilled workers and material prices have been rising in cost. Well, that's actually created by the government itself. It's fooling itself, and it's also wasting public money. Did the administration do some adjustments and set priorities in accordance with the actual circumstances? Thirdly, for the RTHK case, there is this viewpoint, which is also shared by the experts in the construction industry, that is, the design and build approach may have inflated the cost. Some architects told us that if design and build are separated, there is a chance for the cost to be reduced. But then the government is using this approach because for the government it's a tidy and clean approach. It can leave everything to the contractor later. As for government officers, from 2009 to 2013, there was a rise of 60%, schools 19%, infrastructure 27%. Is the government building deluxe officers even more luxurious than the Class A officers? Well, did the administration make adjustments? Yes. The government understands that in the past, there was a detailed paper submitted to the LegCo to explain the issue. There's a resource allocation mechanism system in the government. Every bureau and department submits its budget to the relevant division, and bureau directors will consider their capabilities, and then the resource allocation unit will set priorities. In the next 10 years, capital works expenditure will remain stable and at a high level. If we don't do these projects now and push them later, the peak will only be pushed back forward and resulting in more overspending. Well, I will not comment on the procurement approach. The Development Bureau has a detailed paper on various engineering departments on the procurement approach, including the design and build approach. Every department, in accordance with the nature of the project concerned, will decide which approach to adopt, whether the department will design first and leave the construction to the contractor, or contract it out as a design and build contract. Well, if the approach is against the resource-saving principle, would you still continue with that approach? Well, in deciding the procurement approach, we'll consider costs. Design and build may lead to lower or higher costs, depending on how many details are included, whether there's sufficient information to work out the tendering document, and whether there are other factors leading to rising costs. Well, what about officers, Chairman? Are government officers now very luxurious? Well, we do have basic requirements for government officers. I was only quoting an average figure. As to individual government officers, whether we have higher figures or lower figures, we can give members the details later. So, Chairman, after the meeting, let them give us the details on the overspending projects and underspending projects. Ms. Sittle, well, I think the most important issue here is labor. The Labour Party, of course, does not want to resort to labor importation to resolve the labor shortage problem, because we've only recently seen a slight rise in wages. When Mr. Henry Tung was in the government, he prepared a paper on the construction industry, that is, to turn casual labor to permanent labor, so as to stabilize the labor supply. At the moment, construction workers are already or are quoting fluctuating wages, of course. When the economy is good, they of course want to earn more so as to save up for the more difficult days. So, does the level of wages reflect the labor spent on a particular project? Probably not, because we have to take into account factors like insurance. I think you have to consider both employers and employees, then you'll be able to find a helpful solution. The Permanent Secretary mentioned just now that some of our workers went to Macau to work. In particular, skilled workers were attracted to Macau. If they are to come back, how many are we talking about? And number 3, Chairman, I have to say something for the women workers. On construction sites for a long, long time, women were only employed as laborers. For example, they are picking up the metal wires for resale. Electricians, painting, cement work, etc. All these can be done by women. Well, the metal work, of course, cannot be taken up by women because that will call for huge labor. But there are job types that can be filled by women. So I suggest that gender equality be considered in engineering contracts. And then for SAR, I here see that the sand has been very expensive, and I heard that waste glass can be ground into very fine powder to replace sand, which has become more and more expensive as a type of natural materials. And for incineration, when certain wastes are vaporized, they can be converted into useful construction materials. So we'd like to have more information for reference so that we know there are more choices. Permanent Secretary, when we discussed with the LAB, one important issue discussed was wages. We used the median wage provided by the Census and Statistics Department, but that was not totally accurate. So now, together with the CIC, we conduct a survey once every 6 months. This survey on wages will take into account years of service, such that the wages of local workers will not be affected. As for Mr. Henry Tang's report about use of contracts, well, this was continuously discussed in the industry, but we encountered problems. Some workers don't serve as contract workers. They would like to earn more with more labor, so they'd like to count by projects. Well, if a contract is used to hire a worker, well, you know that for certain job types, they may not exist every day. So if a worker can be engaged in more than one job type, there'll be more flexibility, and we'll see improvement in the contracts. And I believe the employees can help also. In recent times, contractors started to hire employees directly rather than go through subcontractors. That's already an improvement. As for workers going to Macau, we envisage that in 2017 we'll see a shortage of manpower. But in 2007 we already mastered the age and skill distribution of workers. So by 2017 we can adjust the training quotas such that even if workers are to return from other jurisdictions, they will not be rendered out of jobs. As for women, we never exclude women except for work in tunnel. Metal work, painting work, electricians, etc. They now start to engage women. Sand and broken glass or ground glass. I think glass cannot be supplied sufficiently to satisfy all our projects. Just one project will use up all the waste glass in Hong Kong. Mr. Chairman, may I refer to slides 60 and 61? A story is being told there. From 2003 to 2008, our estimates were quite accurate. The surplus eventually was reduced by $13 billion. But from 2003 to 2013, the approved estimate was adjusted to $21 billion. So altogether, $34 billion. And for approved estimates, if you compare the first and the second 5 years, 65 projects had to face that problem. Of course, this paper is very good. It has allowed us to face the crux of the problem. As Dr. Low Ai-Kok said, the engineering sector wants suitable arrangements to be made for our engineering projects such that there will be even distribution of jobs. However, the standard set here, or the norm here, is the sum of money. But we don't know the volume of engineering works and the amount of labor required. Information is ever changing, but we don't have the changing information for estimation. Now, for the 10 major infrastructure projects, including the airport, can we have a comparison between what happened 10 years ago and now? Of course, you told us that there's a drop, but we need the details. The average age of our workers is now 50. That means we are having less entrants, less new entrants, and more retirees. So we want to know the actual situation. If I use the 10 major infrastructure projects as a norm, can we compare the volume of work now with the volume of work then? Can our labor supply meet with such a huge volume of work so as to stabilize our construction costs?
Otherwise, you need to spread out the volume of work more evenly in order that the number of workers in Hong Kong can cope with such an amount of work. And I think this is very important because it would affect the project cost. Secondly, in your paper, you mentioned risk premium, and that directly would cause the project cost to go up. But we believe that the reason why we have the risk premium is because there is an insufficient supply of manpower and machinery. And there's also the uneven distribution of the amount of works. As a result, the contractors will have to put in will project for a higher cost when they put in the bid. In your paper, you say that this is not so. You're saying that you did not suggest that you can that by spreading out the amount of work, it can help stabilize the situation. I hope the Bureau can give us more detailed information to convince us of this argument. Regarding the figures in PowerPoint 60 and 61, and I don't think one should interpret it as like Mr. Wu did, because there's no direct connection between the two. To answer your second question regarding the volume of work, as Dr. Low said, we really want to have a detailed discussion on this item, I may take even more than 10 hours. Actually, the number of workers is based on the amount of work. And actually, I didn't say that the number of workers we have now is smaller than the time when we have the air core projects. But by simply saying that we are spending $70 billion, then we would need more workers than we than we did when we had the airport core projects, and that's what we meant. So the volume of work is still very, very large. As to whether or not we can have a stable, volume of work. As I pointed out, there is a private public work and public capital works, and the what is in the private sector is something that is beyond our control. It is instead subject to the ups and downs of the economy. If you look at Singapore and other jurisdictions, very often we need to, when the economy is not doing very well, we may need to commit more resources into our infrastructures. So very often we cannot subjectively hope that we can plan a stable supply of government public capital work so that the overall volume of work for the industry is stable. Perhaps you can further provide further details on a different occasion in answer to Mr. Wu's question. Dr. Zhou. I think the paper has highlighted many problems and some solutions are proposed. But like Mr. Low Wai Kwok said, the paper is not thorough enough. You have highlighted the problems and you explain how you intend to cope with these problems, but I don't think you can resolve the problem for the entire industry. I think in the past, even though the public the government and the private works would have an impact. But I think most importantly is that we have to consider the ability of the private sector to cope. You say if you were to postpone the peak of the construction works, I think if there are not enough workers then even then it would take a longer time to complete the works. So sometimes you have a labor shortage, at other times you have a labor surplus. Why is it that some workers have gone to Macau? It's because there weren't enough jobs at certain times in Hong Kong. You're looking at the contribution of the construction industry to GDP, it's actually falling. So I really hope that the government, well, you keep implementing all these projects. You think that it could be done. But if you do not consider the ability of the industry to cope with such a volume of work, then I think that there might be a problem. Of course, you would need to come up with more accurate estimates. You say that your estimates are not accurate, and I think that is not too satisfactory. By accurate, of course, you must have reasons why things change after you've made the estimate. Perhaps the assumptions you earlier made have changed. We know that for each case, we will look at each case in question. You said that there is actually an estimate vetting committee. Letco is closely scrutinizing your estimate. But if your committee were being lenient in making the estimate, then I think that would be a major problem. So I like to ask how that committee, vet the estimates and whether or not the figures you submit are accurate in the light of the prevailing circumstances. I think I've never said that we've never considered the ability of the industry to cope. In fact, I said the opposite. As I said, internally in our internal resource allocation mechanism, we have indeed considered the ability of the industry to cope before we decide on the volume of work to be implemented and then prepare the estimate. But whatever our consideration, there are certain factors beyond our control. For example, we may encounter JR, the consultation period may be too long, or for the Kai-Tak project, we have planned it 3 times. For example, the work which should have started in early 2000 can only start recently. We've done our best to arrange our works in accordance with our needs, as whether or not the estimates are accurate. So we can only make use of the latest available information to prepare our estimate. But as I said, each estimate does not mean that is equal to the tender price that will be received. That's not realistic. Regarding the vetting mechanism, we require each department to have an independent team which is not responsible for the project to scrutinize the estimate to see whether or not it's compiled according to the latest information and whether or not a proper unit price has been adopted in preparing such estimates. So that committee is a committee comprised of professionals who know about such matters. Yes, we have more than 10 members who would still like to ask the questions, and I'll now read out the names. Albert Chan, Mr. Leung Chi Cheung, and Mr. Tung. So I'll draw a line there. Mr. Albert Chan. Thank you, Chairman. I'm worried about the continuous escalation of the project cost, which is beyond the ability of the industry to cope. Not only are we seeing rising cost, more importantly, the quality of the work done may actually be compromised. In the 1980s and 1990s, many buildings completed at the time had many problems because at that time, illegal workers were employed, and the quality of work done was actually beyond standard. When some of the dividing walls were demolished, people found that there are all kinds of substandard materials. So I think the situation now seems to be going back to what it was like in the 1990s. So has the government considered the volume of capital works? We're talking about building works totaling $170 billion. I believe that figure will keep going up. Has the government ever estimated this? That is, given the current manpower supply, what is the maximum volume of capital works that Hong Kong can sustain? Have we already exceeded the limit? And if so, what measures will you adopt to cut down on the number of such projects? Because in the next few years, in the buildings that were completed in the 1980s, they will be 30 years old very soon. And you're going to build 90,000 units every year. In the next 10 years, we're going to have many buildings 30, 40 years old, which need to be refurbished. And the HA alone, Hospital Authority, already also have projects costing, $30 billion. And the production peak is also coming as far as... So with all these projects coming on stream, do you have any estimate? I mean, it's like the individual travel scheme. You keep letting people come to Hong Kong, causing havoc, and disturbing people's daily lives. You're now learning from what they did do in the mainland China. They keep developing infrastructures to stimulate the economy, giving a chance for people to collect bribes. So you are responsible for the infrastructural projects. Have you ever made such an estimate? And if so, could you do that so that the problem will not cause Hong Kong to really, suffer? Let me answer the question regarding the ability to cope. As I've said several times earlier, that internally we have a resource allocation mechanism to work out the priorities. In the process, we also look at the ability of the construction industry to cope. By 2017, if we could make full use of the supplementary labor scheme, we should be able to cope with the workload. And after 2017, we will adjust the number of training places. Then I think just by relying on local workers, we'll be able to cope with the number of works. So we will conduct such a review once every 6 months. Thank you. Have you calculated the amount? That is, by 2018, 2019, there will be another peak in the construction industry. Have you ever done any calculation? That is, by how much will the value of the construction work need to go up to before we reach that situation? We want to ensure that there is proper control and there is no cost overrun. I think the PowerPoint already gave members the numbers. How much? 170, 180 billion? 190 billion, roughly. Okay. Mr. Leung Chi Cheung, followed by Ms. Chen Yun Han. And after that, we'll wrap up our discussion on this item. Thank you. Chairman, according to the paper, it would appear that the government is trying to lobby LegCo members to support the importation of labor in order to resolve the shortage of labor in the construction industry. If I quote from a few of the paragraphs in the paper, the message is very clear. Although the director said that is not so, that there will be sufficient supply through training. But I think the figure is not very clear. Now, if I look at the figures, from 2003 to 2004 to 2012 and 2013, there are a total of 600 projects. And from 2007 to 2012, there were 270 projects. So there was abrupt surge in the number. So in recent years, there was a drastic increase in the number of capital works, and then you have a problem with labor supply. You are now telling us that in future we need an additional 30,000 additional construction workers, 20,000 of which would need to be skilled workers. And then if I go back to what you say in para 19 of your paper, at the moment, the number at the end of 2013, the CIC was able to train 4,500 trainees, and the total number of people joining the industry is about 3,500. I think we now know very clearly that going forward, there will be a shortage of 30,000, and you're only training a few thousand workers. So I don't see how in the next few years you would be able to, fill the gap through training. So I think the crux of the matter is that you have a massive volume of capital works, not mentioning the construction of private buildings and other facilities. And secondly, your construction cost is going up, mainly because the Hong Kong dollar is depreciating, whereas in the past, when the prefabricated materials were manufactured in the mainland, when the Hong Kong dollar was stronger, then the cost was much lower. But now, 100 Hong Kong dollar can only be exchanged for 78 renminbi. So over the last 10 to 15 years, the government is going to drastically increase the number of residential units, and it is inevitable that residential prices would go up. So my question for the director is this, that is, if we do not import labor, will we really be able to cope? Although I do not support labor import, but on the premise of safeguarding the interests of local workers, but I think labor import is acceptable. But I'd like to know how many workers do you intend to import? Well, Chairman already gave the figure of 30,000 and 20,000. That would be the figures before we take into account the number of people that we can train and the number of people we can attract to rejoin the construction industry, namely those who have left the industry. Ms. Leung Chi Chang referred to the 4,000 odd trainees. The number now has gone up to 8,000 per annum. So in 4 years, we should be able to have more than 30,000 skilled workers. Will these people who finish with the training, can they join the industry? No, we try our best to encourage them. Even though you have 4,000 odd graduates, only 3,000 join the construction industry. I think we can, follow up on that on a different occasion. I think you can briefly wrap up. The number of training places, since it has gone up by such a large extent, and will continue to attract them to join the construction industry. I already gave you the figure that more young people are now willing to join the construction industry. We're offering all kinds of allowances. Regarding rising material costs, as I explained, they only make up 10% of the rising construction costs. Ms. Chen Yun Han. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the administration for preparing this paper, telling us about the challenges that we are facing. But I don't think the government has really focused on the key issues. You anticipate that the volume of capital works will go up, and inevitably you will need more workers. Chairman, there are still many other projects yet coming on stream. And the government is also planning to convert some NGO facilities, more than 60 of them, to take care of the senior citizens and the disabled. There are many other projects coming on stream. In the light of this situation, I don't think you're really tackling the problem. If the government doesn't really address the issue, then I'm worried that the problem will continue and the construction industry will continue to complain. In the end, you have to import labor. Of course, I hope the Permanent Secretary told us that if more young people are willing to the construction industry, then the situation will stabilize. That will be fine, but objectively, I don't think that may happen. So, the Deputy Chairman also pointed out that in the construction industry, the workers either starve or they would have more than enough work that they can cope. I was, communicating with Mr. Chow Yun-ting, and this year, 4 people died in the construction industry. Other than occupational health and safety on construction site, I think we need to bargain with the government regarding the labor situation. In 1995, the construction industry was booming. At that time, the electrical set up a select committee to discuss the question of contractors using substandard materials.
So I'm afraid that there will be jury bills again, like those in the 90s, and there might be bribery problems as well. So in face of this situation, my question for the Permanent Secretary there are still some aged workers in the construction industry. We'll try our best to attract them to rejoin the sector for those aged over 50. So can you split up the works into smaller trades so that these aged workers can join or rejoin the industry? But then the objective fact is that we are short of labor, and there were talks about importing workers. So in the construction industry, there are now 300,000 workers, and among them, because some companies are employing the young workers and not the old workers, how are you going to deal with that, Permanent Secretary? So, from the figures presented among the 320,000 workers, this survey was done together with the labor unions. We have figures on the number who have left, who are underemployed, and some 240,000 workers are employed. So we are all agreed on these figures. Now, as to whether contractors are employing the young workers and not the old workers, when actually we have called up some 70,000 workers, and we've been able to manage to get in touch with some 20,000 of them, and most of them work 5 to 6 days a week. So the existing labor force is fully utilized already. Now 60,000 workers have left the industry for various reasons. For some of them, we may be able to attract them to rejoin the industry. As for those underemployed or unemployed, we have different avenues to match them with the job vacancy. So we are taking practical steps to deal with the problems. I don't get Mr. Chan's point or about us not dealing with the issue. I think he is beating around the bush here. So if you are unhappy with his answer, perhaps we can find some other time to talk with him again. I do have information supplied to me by the Construction Workers Union. If they are doing a good job, we won't be getting so many comments and complaints from the labor unions. Well, let me suggest this. You yourself and the labor unions and ourselves would perhaps sit down together and hold a meeting to discuss this. Yes, actually, we have a close dialogue with the labor unions and close relationship with them. I'll draw a line after Ms. Chen Yinhan. Over 10 members have asked questions. We have some important agenda items coming up. So in the interest of time, I will stop here, and then we will move on to the next agenda item. For those who failed to, who are not given the opportunity to raise a question, please, my apology for you. All right, the next agenda item. That is manpower increase for implementing initiatives to increase land supply and redistribution of responsibilities among directorate posts in the Development Bureau and CEDD. The government representatives are here already. So first of all, welcome to you all. And the list of the officials is already tabled, so I'm not going to introduce them one by one. So government representatives, please take us through the agenda. Well, please be very brief. Chairman, increasing land supply is to increase housing supply, and so one of the major tasks of the Development Bureau, the government has accepted the recommendation of the Long-Term Housing Strategy Steering Committee to build 470,000 units, private and public housing units. In the next 10 years, the ratio of public to private housing is 6:4. So to increase land supply, the government must adopt a multi-pronged approach to increase land supply, and various related initiatives must be undertaken to make full use of existing land and to identify new land to increase land supply in the short, medium, and long term. Now, as a policy bureau, our workload has increased substantially. To do a better job, we need to increase manpower. So this paper invites members to support the following recommendations. And one is to create a deputy secretary and a government engineer under the Development Bureau, and under the CEDD to create 2 CE chief engineers posts. And then we also propose the consequential redistribution of responsibilities among directorate posts and reorganization in the Development Bureau and CEDD. We propose a creation of a 1 permanent AOSGB D3 post in the Planning and Lands branch, and he will be leading a team to increase land supply to be supported by a cross-departmental team. We will have a surveyor, technical officer, land surveyor, and survey officer supporting this DS. And through the Land Supply Tracking Subcommittee, he will be monitoring and coordinating land supply initiatives and policies, and it will also liaise closely with other government departments and policy bureaus. And he would also be providing support to the Steering Committee on Land Supply, chaired by the FS, and also the Committee on Planning and Land Development. Another important task is to maintain close liaison with the relevant stakeholders and to provide them with more support. So the team is headed by the DS, and one of the tasks is that he would coordinate the rezoning of 150 potential sites which can be used for building housing. And if that exercise is successful, and we would be able to provide 210,000 units, private and public housing units. After the team has been established, he will be working together with the planning department and the buildings department and other technical departments on all these initiatives. Now, under the Lands and Planning and Lands Bureau, there are 2 deputy secretaries, Mr. Chan Chongqing and also Mr. Chang. The latter one is responsible for building works. Now, in the past couple of years, under the planning and lands branch, they do have an onerous workload which goes beyond the capacity. So we do see the need to establish a permanent DS post to cope with the increased workload. We also suggest establishing or creating one supernumerary GED2 post in Works branch and 2 supernumerary CE posts at the CEDD. Now, as for the Works branch, we need to do various infrastructural works related to land supply, and the issues involved are very complex, and there are advanced works to be undertaken. We also have to work together with various works and technical departments. So under the Works Bureau, Works branch, we propose establishing one supernumerary GE post, which should be filled by a government engineer who is well versed in the Works branch, and he will lead a new land supply section, and he would be dealing with various work projects and technical studies under the land supply initiative. Now, this land supply section will also be looking at the development of the Lantau Island, and to build the development of the East Lantau metropolis, and he will also be supporting the Lantau Island Advisory Committee, and he would also be the person to resolve interfacing issues and conflicting requirements. Now, apart from these direct posts, in the next financial year, we would also be creating 220 non-directorate posts involving many different departments and bureaus, and all these posts are listed in Appendix 20, and that include many technical and professional staff, land surveyors, estate surveyors, engineers, and so on and so forth. So we hope that with increased manpower, we can expedite the land supply and housing supply. Now I'd like to defer to the director of CEDD to take us through the reorganization of CEDD. CEDD is responsible for implementing the various projects under the land supply initiative. Now, in order to do that, as what Mr. Chow said, we suggest that we would create 2 supernumerary CE posts that will last for 5 years up to 31st of March 2019. And in the NTE Development Office, 1 CE post will be created to look into developing Shangshui and Fanling. And he would also be looking into potential sites for development and to identify sites suitable for housing development. This CE will also be responsible for studying Kong Apo, Kutong Lam, Nam Tin South areas. Now, in the NT West Development Office, another CE post is created, and he will be responsible for site formation of Hong Shui Q, and also the Cam Tin South area. And he would also be conducting feasibility for Cam Tin South, and he would also be undertaking study on land housing supply on the NT West. Now, apart from increasing manpower, we also review the existing organization structure. We propose re-engineering or reorganization of the department so that our cost effectiveness can be enhanced. In short, we suggest delineating the boundaries between the NT and NTW areas, and the North districts will come under NT East Development Office, and NT project will come under the NT East Development Office as well. And also for the CEO's BCP office or division will also be deployed under the NT East Development Office, and the ADD post from the headquarters will also be deployed for 5 years to the NT East Development Office. So with all these changes, we hope that our work efficiency can be boosted and we can more effectively launch or implement land supply initiatives. So we hope that the members can support our proposals to create the posts. We hope to seek approval from the Establishment Subcommittee in April, and then thereafter we seek the endorsement from the Finance Committee before we create the posts. Is members' question time? I suggest that 4 minutes be allowed for members' questionings and answers from the administration. So please be succinct in your questions. Zhang Chiu and Fernando Zhang, Albert Chan, Leung Kwok Hong, Lo Wai Kwok. Vice Chairman, I am very concerned about whether the civil service team is really big enough to cope with the increased workload, and I support increasing civil service posts to cope with the increased workload. And it's important to increase manpower for land supply and housing supply initiatives. Apart from the DS, we're talking about 1 GE and 2 CE posts. There is one point that I don't understand. When we develop land, we don't talk about engineers. There are land planning work to be done, surveyors, surveying work, and so on. Why is it that you don't need to increase manpower on in those areas? So are these posts sufficient? Or is it true that you just start off with planning and then you do the engineering works afterwards? In terms of planning, we must do a good job. When we have been able to identify a piece of land, we must have good design to meet with public aspirations. Should you consider all these factors as a whole, or is it the case that you have already increased the relevant manpower previously? So can the administration explain to me? Thank you, Chairman. This time around, we are seeking endorsement from members on the creation of these direct posts. Now, in terms of increasing land supply, starting from the next financial year, we hope to create 220 non-directorate posts, and most of them are professional grades, including what the Vice Chairman said, town planners, architects, estate surveyors, land surveyors, engineers, geotechnical engineers, structural engineers, building services engineers, and so on. All these will be provided for. Now, this is an embarrassing timing here because tomorrow is the budget announcement day, so I can't give you a lot of details today. Now, you are proposing directorate posts for CDD and planning and lands branch, but what about the other departments? Do they need directorate posts as well? We have to look at the posts on a need basis. So if the director posts of these other departments can cope, then there is no problem. Does it mean that they are more efficient? No, that's not the case. If existing staff can cope the increased workload, then the extra work can be shared among the incumbents. And we will strive for resources where manpower is in need. For these posts, would you be opening up the posts for application by other professionals? We suggest that the administrative officers will fill these posts, and he will be supported by technical and professional staff members. But then those underneath him are not directorates, right? In your paper, you didn't say categorically whether there are senior posts supporting the DS. And it seems that he is only supported by professional staff. There is a great range in the type of ranks between the DS and his subordinates. Now, under this DS, there will be 2 PAS under him and in his team. There will also be surveyors and town plannings helping him out. Dr. Fernando Zhang. We support identifying land for development. And I can appreciate why you need people to undertake that work. But then you were talking about a massive scale of recruitment here. You're talking about an amount of over $200 million per year. So I have 2 concerns. Many of the projects mentioned here, we haven't got the green light yet. Say in the NT, NT North, NT West development. No approval has yet been given. Now, we also talk about reclamation projects as well. So I'm not sure whether at this stage, when approval has not been given by the LegCo, we should be approving the creation of these posts. Are you trying to jump the gun?
Secondly, for land site identification, the biggest problem now is lack of transparency for information dissemination. Very often is the people helping us to identify land sites, and we're trying to squeeze information out of the administration. Earlier, we asked the administration how many land sites it has in hand. It gave us a reply, and we said, so many land sites, and they said, no, many of these land sites are full of slopes. And where are those so-called 3,000 hectares of land for housing? And then we asked whether the military sites can be used for development, and what about the private clubs? Take, for example, the golf course in Fanling. We tried to squeeze information out of the administration. The Fanling golf course is only paying a symbolic premium to the government. So now you are telling us that you need more people to dig out information for you. Can you set up a transparent database for public perusal at any time, so that we know the land uses, areas, and distribution of all the land sites? And then in Hong Kong, how many land sites you have, the area where the short-term tenancies are, and what about the vacated public facilities, like how many schools, their areas, distribution, when will they put to what use, which bureau is responsible, etc., etc. Without these information, we're just like being thrown into a black hole with no information at all. So we'd like to make information transparent. Permanent Secretary, well, first of all, there's no way for us to jump the gun. Without funding approval from the administration, from the LegCo, there's nothing we can do. The 200-odd non-directorate colleagues, their future duties, and so forth, are set out in the enclosures. We have to start with studies, geotechnical investigation, detailed design, and so forth. So without funding approval from the LegCo, there's nothing we can do. As for land information, every now and then we received questions from LegCo members. And this Deputy Secretary will be coordinating information dissemination. Sometimes communication has not been perfect enough, so DS3 will improve the information system such that in future we'll be able to disseminate clearer information to the public. Dr. Fernando Zhang, I'm not talking about internal communication. I'm talking about transparency. Mr. Albert Chan, Mr. Chairman, any manpower deployment and development are relative to each other. Of course, you say you want a lot more people. Well, basically, we can't reject your proposals. How is this proposed establishment different from past establishment of the government? Can you give us a paper after the meeting? Well, in the 1990s, I was very familiar with the 10 major infrastructure projects. Throughout Hong Kong, we saw projects everywhere, and then we have 85,000 to 90,000 housing units per year. If you compare the present target to that in the 1990s, and then you look at the number of directorate posts, professional posts, and other posts, do give us a comparison table. At that time, how much manpower you have, what manpower you had at the peak, and what are you asking now? Please give us the comparison so that we can pass a judgment. Can you give us the information after the meeting? Permanent Secretary, Mr. Chan does not have to worry. Every time when we apply for more manpower, the Development Bureau will carefully examine requests from departments. Besides, the Civil Service Bureau and the Financial Services and the Treasury Bureau will also scrutinize our proposals very carefully. While I understand the internal vetting procedures of the government, back then we had the 10 major infrastructure projects. We monitored the budgets in one go. But in recent years, say within a year, I never saw so many directorate posts to be increased. We see such increases in each and every department. Maybe C.Y. Leung is trying to distribute returned benefits to these people. Well, let's not talk about the politically appointed officials. We see a crazy increase in other posts. So maybe C.Y. Leung is trying to repay his funds. Well, the 10 major infrastructure projects are easier to monitor. Well, other projects like the ITB should be scrutinized separately. Permanent Secretary, I don't want to create difficulties for you. We have to be fair to you. So please give us a comparison table. Well, housing units, 20 to 30,000 housing units. Oh, that's a small number. You just look at the past few years, 20 to 30,000 per year is a small number. At the peak, we had even 90,000 per year. So 20 to 30,000 is a very small number. If you are to produce 90,000 per year in future, you need a lot more posts. Is this a problem with the system, with the people, or whatnot? Or is it because the CE wants to distribute benefits? Well, for Mr. Chan's question, for land supply increases, for the increased manpower required for 2014-15, we'll submit a paper after the meeting. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong? Mr. Chairman, I share similar views with Mr. Albert Chan. They are creating so many posts. It's difficult to say whether or not they're trying to distribute benefits. Well, of course, if you create new posts, those who are obedient enough will fill those posts? All those who have been educated know the answer. My conclusion is you need a great deal of manpower to get land. C.Y. Leung made that very clear. It's gambling, actually. You will use so many civil servants to do the job. Directorate and non-directorate posts are included. But what if you don't succeed in getting the land sites? You don't get them yet at the moment. Say, NT Northeast, NT West. You have come to LegCo for discussions, but what about their feasibility? You have to explain to us. You need a great deal of manpower and resources to obtain land. You need to lobby people. You are blindly grabbing land. Well, just Dr. Koh Man alone were pointing to this site and that site and told us that those sites were suitable for mainland chickens. But in just a couple of days' time, he changed his words. Well, he mentioned 3 land sites in one go, but eventually all those 3 land sites are not feasible. So, frankly, tell us whether or not these land sites are feasible. You shouldn't just consider engineering works, say chief engineer, NT3, to plan for public engagement. You need 1 post there. Well, public engagement is one of the duties of that chief engineer. Is that what you are telling us? If that's so, please make that very clear to us. Then we'd better give you approval one by one. Well, I'll leave more time for you to answer my questions. 10 odd minutes, so speak slowly. Mr. Chairman, Hong Kong lacks land for housing development and economic development. Many new policies under the bureaus need new land sites. That's already a fact. Even for existing sites, if we are to add facilities to them, we have to study technical feasibility and support, how many ancillary facilities have to be provided, and so forth. And public aspirations are ever growing. So very often we need colleagues with expertise and professionalism before we can do our planning work well. Well, don't waste my time. Just tell me, how many land sites have you obtained? I mean formed land sites. And what about land sites that are yet to be formed? Yes? Permanent Secretary? Well, we have both types of land sites. We'd like to make good use of them. We have to develop new land sites as well, and then we have to conduct investigation and studies, and then engineering works before we can actually use them. The whole process is very long, and a great deal of work is involved, so we need extra manpower. Next, Dr. Low Wai Kwok. Mr. Chairman, last week, this council spent 4 days' time to discuss and scrutinize the bill on the so-called dual harsh measures. During the debates, I pointed out why we had such an acute shortage of manpower at the moment. The short-term harsh measures have actually damaged the principle of free economy. Besides, many small landlords have been suffering. But there's no alternative. Why have we come to such a situation? It's because the past few terms of the SARG have not done enough in terms of land development. Under the Permanent Secretary, there'll be a number of manpower adjustments. For example, the D3 post will focus on land development. I think we should support this post. Of course, we expect good performance from them. We have to give them sufficient resources. Otherwise, land development will just be empty talk. We're all very concerned about housing development and a balanced supply of housing units and land sites. So there's no reason for us to oppose this proposed suitable increases in human resources. 3 chief engineers, there are supernumerary posts. Now, I support the creation of these posts. At the same time, I have to point out that, as the Deputy Chairman mentioned, the professional posts in the government should be mutually supportive. So there should be sufficient ancillary human resources support. Well, let me cite an example. This is not under the permanent secretary. Now, in the housing department, they have the structural engineer, geotechnical engineers, building surveyors, building maintenance engineers, and so forth. Now, they should cooperate with one another. So I can envisage that the creation of these posts will exert pressure on existing posts within the government. Today, the budget will be announced. So I understand that today the permanent secretary may not be able to produce comprehensive responses. Anyway, I support the permanent secretary. Perhaps the permanent secretary can tell us something about striking a balance in manpower arrangements. Well, yes, we do need to look at needs and demands when we create posts. I agree with Dr. Low that we should have mutual support among our colleagues. For this DS post, he is to coordinate all relevant departments. Even in the Planning and Lands Division, apart from the DS and PASs, there'll be also town planners, land surveyors, and surveying officers. We do need such technical support before good policies can be formulated. Thank you. Next, Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Chairman. I recall that earlier we approved certain posts for huge projects like the Lantang Heng Yun Wai project. So now they're asking for coordinating DS post. Now this DS post to be created is a permanent post. It is to be the most important support for land identification or land supply. Now, before this post is created in the CEDD, who is responsible for the work at the moment? And for this incumbent colleague, after the new DS assumes office, where will he be deployed? Will there be any synergy between the two of them? As we said, under land policies, there are macro issues to be studied. For example, the Lantau development project will have a dedicated committee for it. But now, that project has not even started, and you're already asking for a DS post to provide services to that project. So for this new DS post, after it is created, what will happen to the incumbent? Permanent Secretary? Well, under me, there are 2 deputy secretaries. Well, you've been seeing them very frequently, particularly in residence meetings. They actually spend excessive time and energy on their work. In the long run, that's not ideal, not satisfactory. Before land sites come onto stream, for those sites already with infrastructure, we'll have to provide housing units. In the next 5 years, there are 150 potential sites for converting into residential uses. And this post will have to do liaison work. Take if new drainage works are required, they'll do communication. Mr. Thomas Chan will oversee planning works. For large sites with no infrastructure yet, a lot have to be done. So one is to implement the actual work, and in the long run we'll have to look at land supply. So this shouldn't be a permanent post, it should be a supernumerary post, so that we can assess the progress before we turn this DS post into a permanent post. I think that will be a fairer approach to society. I understand that planning is something for the long term. As time goes by, various decisions will be made. So should this DS post be a supernumerary post rather than a permanent post? Can you explain why a supernumerary post is more suitable?
I think it will take 8 to 10 years before land which is unformed becomes formed land. We propose that this should be a permanent post, as Ms. Low said just now. In the past, very often the government will look at the economic cycle and the property market, and also the public's demand for housing. If the demand is lower, then we would slow down our work in terms of land development. Recently, we have a new initiative, and the government has officially stated that we need to build up a land bank. Even if it is not going to be released to the market, we still need to build up a land bank so that when the need arises, we will be able to quickly provide the land. So this is a long-standing, effort, and therefore we believe that we should create a permanent post before we can achieve that objective. If it's going to be time limited, then we could only be talking about a few sites in the land reserve, but when talking about building up a land bank in the long run. Steve got him. Thank you. In the policy address, the CE mentioned the need to develop new land, and also we need to start all these projects, and therefore the workload will definitely go up. Mr. Wu raised the issue as to whether the post should be supernumerary or permanent, and you've given us very clear reasons as to why the post would need to be a permanent post. Previously, you have a deputy secretary overseeing this area of the work, and you're increasing the post under the lands and planning and lands branch. So could you have a more detailed breakdown between the land part and the planning part? Because it's not like the post of the chief engineer, which is a supernumerary post. I also note that there's already, I think without the increase in manpower, you will not be able to, implement all these policy initiatives and satisfy the public's demand. So, could you split the post up into two, one in charge of planning, the other one in charge of land. So could you, elaborate a bit more on that? Thank you, Mr. Yu, for the question. Planning and land cannot be easily separated because when you come to a certain stage in the planning, the land's division will need to come in to look at the land requirements. So it's difficult to divide, to split up the land and the planning part of our work. We have two deputy secretaries, one for planning and land, the other one in charge of building safety. So there is already a division of labor between these two deputy secretaries. As to why the post is going to be permanent, we now have such an acute shortage of land, and it will take a long time before we can have farmland that will be available to the market. For the past 10 years, the Hong Kong economy had gone through ups and downs, and there is this keen demand for housing. But in the past, when the demand for land goes down, with the ups and downs of the business cycle, our planning also slowed down. We all know that from the time of planning to the time the site is available for release to the market, we're talking about a long period of time, and therefore we need to have a land policy, we need to have build up a land reserve. We need to have the land available and ready so that when there is a need, that we should be able to supply the land to the market as expediently. So that is why we are proposing to create this permanent post, because creating and building up a land bank is a long-standing effort. Thank you. I think we finished all the first round. Are there any questions? Any members would like to go for the second round? Dr. Fernando Zhang, 3 minutes. First of all, if the government does not intend to release the uses of the land to be formed, then I will not support this proposal to create the post. You want to, employ high staff, more staff to increase land supply, then you need to give the public more information. Because regarding the distribution of land available in Hong Kong, the government is not giving us too much information. And secondly, regarding the few new development projects like the NT-East, NT-North, and NT-Northeast, I think in your plan, you've not explained in detail what is the current situation. All the information is about the future, as if there's nothing, no land available, which is being planned. So I hope that with the additional staff available, your planning information should also contain, for example, the land uses, how many people are living in a particular piece of land, what facilities there are, how much agricultural land do we have, how much of that is under cultivation. Only then will we be able to have a before and after comparison. You're not only telling us what is going to happen in future, but that doesn't mean that we're starting from zero. Regarding land use information, on the one hand, we have the knowns, and the other hand, the unknowns that we need to look into. Regarding the former, I think if you go to the planning department, there is a software so that if you pick a point on a map, you'll be able to check the planning, the land use for that site, and the land use could change any time. So we cannot check, for example, on a daily basis how many people are living in a particular location. We would have to depend on the regional studies. Say if we have a piece of land, we want to look into the development potential of a site that is not yet formed, then we will conduct a site visit to find out what activities, industrial activities there are there in the area, how many people live there, and also we would be, periodically also come back to LegCo to report to members. I'm not talking about specifically the exact number of people living on a particular site. I'm talking about a snapshot of the population, the industrial and other facilities in the area, and this is very important. Well, in our study, we certainly do that. Mr. Uchiwai. Thank you. The Permanent Secretary emphasized again and again that this needs to be a permanent post because land formation is a continuous process. But in my opinion, this area of work is something that the government should be doing anyway, and it should also be the work that is already being undertaken by the CEDD. With the creation of this Deputy Director post, as a result, land formation or land creation will become, something permanent. So you're telling me that the person holding this post will have to create land in order to justify his holding on to the post. So I really therefore query whether we need to create this permanent post. I agree that the Deputy Director and also all the colleagues in the CEDD are already very busy with their respective area of work. But if you ask me to accept your logic, that is, land creation is a continuous process, therefore you need to create the post of a Deputy Director to oversee this, then I would not accept. I hope the Permanent Secretary could consider whether you could be more pragmatic and create this post as a supernumerary post and then have a review 3 to 5 years from now, so that in the process of creating land we know what the government is doing, and that there could be a review mechanism to see whether or not what you're proposing or what you're doing actually meets with the public's aspiration. I think members will understand that as civil servants we have to follow established systems. Every time we ask for resources, we will consider what posts at which rank should be created and whether it should be permanent or supernumerary. Regarding the present exercise, it's not that we want to create this post and therefore if we want to keep in the post, we will continue with the work of land formation. In 2011-2012, we already pointed out the need to build up a land reserve. The work started already at the time. But now the work in respect of land formation and creation has increased drastically. I think many members are well aware of that. The workload is so heavy that a single Deputy Secretary for Planning and Work will not be able to cope. And we also need to satisfy public aspiration. We need to increase housing supply. We need more land to do that. So in order to do this job well, I don't think we'll be able to satisfy public aspiration by relying on a single Deputy Director. I hope Mr. Wu will understand. Deputy Chairman, I think I'll draw a line here and then we can proceed to the next item. Chairman, I think in the paper, the government is giving us the impression that the Deputy Secretary Planning and Works, the 3 posts actually, the Deputy Secretary will be underpinned by 3 engineers. You told us that there will be other supporting staff. So if we approve this proposal, I hope you will give us more details regarding the ancillary staff. Whenever we talk about planning and so on, other professional staff would be involved. Your paper doesn't give us such information. I hope next time you can give us such supplementary information. I think the Deputy Chairman is most correct. Support from technical support from urban planners, surveyors, and so on are very important. So, in respect of the 2014-2015, the additional posts we're going to create in 2014-2015, we will provide, a paper for members. I think we can now wrap up our discussion on this item. So I'd like to ask whether members support the government's proposal to submit the proposal to the Establishment Committee. Any objection? I'd like to put on record, Chairman, that I still feel that the post of Deputy Secretary should be a supernumerary post. Any other suggestions? Dr. Fernando Joe. The Labour Department does not support that because this proposal involved many new plans and recommendations which have yet to be approved. The government is still yet to go through the town planning process, so I will not support this proposal at this stage. Furthermore, they've not given us all the information we would need. Mr. Chen Kam Lam, I think at the moment there is a serious shortage of housing and land. So, hiring additional staff to take care of the additional work required is very important. So the DAB is in full support of the proposal. Mr. Albert Chen, Chairman, I'd like to, call for a vote, and we are against that. No, I don't think we need to ring the bell. So those in support of the government's proposal, please put up your hands. 7. Those against? 4. Abstention? None. So the item is, approved, and the paper will be submitted to the Establishment Committee for deliberation. Next item. Will be the advanced site formation and engineering infrastructure works at Kutong North and Fanling North, new development areas. We'll now invite the administration to join us. I would need to declare that in Kutong North and Fanling North, I owned land in those two areas. According to our rules of procedures, the chairman of the committee, in the event of a pecuniary or role conflict, there is no restriction for myself to continue to chairing the meeting. So, do members have any objection to my continuing to chair the meeting? Thank you very much. Thank you for your confidence. I'd like to first of all welcome the officials present for this item, so I shan't introduce them one by one. So I'd like to invite the officials to give us a brief introduction. The administration will give us a PowerPoint presentation. Let's hope it will be brief. Please proceed. Chairman. Thank you very much, Chairman. In July 2013, we announced the amendment to the development of NT East, and government announced the development of the two development areas in Kutong North and Fanling North. So that in order to tie in with the, in order to provide the facilities, we need to proceed with the advanced work for the site formation and engineering infrastructure works for Kutong North and Fanling North. NDAs in order to provide sufficient infrastructures in a timely manner, and also the advanced site design. They will need to start in the third quarter of this year. The CEDD will commission a consultant to proceed with the detailed design and site investigation for the advanced work, and therefore we are now applying for funding. In May this year, we will go to the FC to apply for funding to commission the consultant. We are applying for funding of $340 million. Other than consulting the development panel, on the 19th of March, we will also consult with the PWSC. According to the usual practice, the technical preparation for the project and will proceed at the same time with the implementation arrangements, including the statutory planning procedure and the land so we will meanwhile also liaise with the affected residents. Since after we have announced the amended version in July last year, we've already conducted a series of briefings with the stakeholders, including the rural committees, village representatives, and the villagers, and also the operators of the homes of the elderly and residents. The commercial operators, including the business of chambers of commerce and the farmers, the local residents and the local concerned groups. The Development Bureau is fully aware of their aspirations and recommendations. We are actively considering those recommendations and discussing with the Development Bureau. So on the basis that it's a compatible public interest, we will try to come up with a feasible, way to meet the aspirations of the residents. The two NDAs are an important part of the development of NT. The Bureau will listen to public views in order to minimize the public's concern. The funding application this time will not affect those part of our work. The consultant, while it's conducting the detailed design, we will set up a community liaison group to step up communication and assist with dealing with matters relating to the planning. In order to shorten the time, we need to proceed with the procedure. Otherwise, if we go through the timetable for each of the procedures, it will take much longer. And if the detailed design and site investigation will delay, the whole project and land supply will also be delayed. Next, I'd like to invite our colleague from CEDD, Mr. Wong, to brief members about the detailed design and site investigation and the advanced works involved. Thank you.
I have a PowerPoint presentation to take you through the substance of the application. This is the location of the Tung North and Fanling North ND8s. In short, the aim of the advanced works is to provide about 16,000 new flats. 80% of them are 12,900 public housing flats, taking up about 13 hectares. For private housing, there will be 3,100 flats, taking up about an area of 5 hectares. For these new flats, they can accommodate about 46,500 people. We hope to start the detailed design in the third quarter of this year, and we hope that in 2018, major construction works can start. According to this timetable, there will be the first population intake in 2023. And in the new NDAs, there will be 5,000 new jobs created. This photo or diagram shows the Tung North Advanced Works area. To the left, in the green area, that would be the area for our advanced works, and then the surrounding areas, infrastructure works have to be undertaken. For the next slide, we can see the detailed distribution of the various facilities. In the green area, we will have public housing, And there were government facilities, schools, hospitals, sports, and GIC facilities. There will be a piece or plot of land for local rehousing, and there will be commercial and private housing as well. There will be other support facilities like service reservoirs, fire station, pumping station. These will also be included in the advanced works. Fanling North advanced works areas, the green area is near to the public interchange area. Detailed district distribution is shown in the next slide. There are GIC sites, pumping stations, sewage treatment works, and road improvement works. The scope for advanced works: design of site formation works, housing, community facilities, rehousing at NDAs. Design of engineering infrastructure works, including roads, drainage, sewage, waterworks, pumping stations, sewage treatment works, so on and so forth. There will also be an in-depth investigation study for a district cooling system. And in Tung North, we would also be looking at the soil contamination problem. At the site, there will also be site investigation works and supervision work to be carried out. We hope to seek funding this year, and we'll start the detailed design and site investigation in August 2014. The technical work is to be proceeded in parallel with other implementation steps, with a view to expediting implementation of the project. We seek funding for actual works, and when the detailed design has been completed, we will have a detailed estimate of the project costs, and we will also be coming up with a more detailed timetable. In the interim period, we will also be maintaining dialogue with the stakeholders on implementation, including compensation and rehousing, deferring the detailed design and site investigation would defer the whole project and land supply. So much for our presentation. Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you. According to the rules of procedure, Section 83A, if members have a direct or indirect pecuniary interest on topics, he must declare the nature of that interest before he speaks. Question time. 4 minutes allowed for each member, including questions and answers. Please make it brief. Members: Chan Hak Kan, Fernando Zhang, Gary Fan, Chan Han Pan, Chen Kam Lam, UC Wing, Alice Smack, Raymond Chen. 8 members in total. Chan Hak Kan. I think the government wants to speed up the development of NENT because it wants more housing to be built. But then there are voices in the community that when the OZP of Tung North and Fanling North were submitted to the Town Planning Board, there are some problems with the procedures. So can the Secretary tell us that whether the procedures are in order? Are there previous examples of such arrangements in the past? That's my first question. I have also read reports in the Tung North NTA. There are toxic substances in the soil of that area. So in the site investigation work, would you be looking into these toxic substances, the extent of such a problem? And if yes, would you also follow up and deal with the problem? If not, if you really develop the area, would there be delays to the project because there are such toxic substances, or will the costs be driven up as a result? Third question. I noticed that the government said in the Tung North NTA, a district cooling system will be built. I'm a vice chairman of the Environmental Affairs Panel, and in the last term of government, we discussed the Kai-Tak development. The same provision, i.e. district cooling system, is planned to be provided in that area. But members have doubts on the effectiveness of such a cooling system, and there is bound to be budget overrun. So if the government is going to proceed with this district cooling system, please learn lessons from the Kai-Tak experience. Initially, the district cooling system in Kai-Tak was meant to be used by government departments, and private organizations are at liberty as to whether to use them. Then the cost effectiveness is not high. So please examine these issues. Thank you, Mr. Chen. I will take the first question, and for the second and third questions, I will ask Mr. Wong to take those. As for procedures, according to existing practices, for preparation works of such projects, many procedures are being taken forward on the same time, including land clearance and so on and so forth. We want to expedite the process as much as possible. We have similar arrangements before, including the Anderson Road quarry. The town planning procedures are going on at the same time. Kai-Tak development, the same. Wan Chai reclamation phase 2, the same. Two Moon areas 54, site formation and road improvement projects. Similar arrangements are also in place. Mr. Wong, second question about Tung North. Toxic substances found. In the planning and development study undertaken previously, we have taken samples from the soil, and in our EIA report, we also included a chapter on that. Overall, the EIA report says that after some treatment, these toxic substances could be solidified, and they would not pose any hazards to residents. So in any case, in our detailed design, we have made provision for that. In paragraph 16 of the paper, item C, in site investigation works, $41 million have been provided for that item. We want to take more samples of the soil in the upcoming works to really look at the latest situation and draw up effective remedial measures to ensure that the situation is safe. Third question about district cooling system. Yes. In the previous planning and development study, we conducted an initial study. A rough assessment is that in Tung North, there may be a longer period is needed to recover the cost. But that was an initial study. So in the detailed design, in paragraph 16, item A2, we have made a provision for conducting a more detailed study for the district cooling system to see whether it is a feasible project, whether it is cost effective. Of course, for the moment, for this in-depth study, we will come up with an initial design, a model, and a financial analysis to see how the procurement approach should be. And also to see the cost effectiveness of the project before we decide whether we should build a district cooling system in Tung North. Well, your time is up. Dr. Fernando Zhang. Thank you, Chairman. The Labour Party opposes this sum of $340 million for conducting this advanced site formation and engineering infrastructure works project. We don't think it's a fair project, so to speak. The grassroots people are to suffer from this project, and those who are benefiting are just the major conglomerates. I know that the town planning process is still ongoing. To our understanding, for Tung North and Fanling North, over 40,000 submissions were received, and 90% of them objected to the projects. So the majority of the people are objecting to the projects. And if we force through the projects, and we spent $340 million, and ultimately, if we decided against implementing the projects, this amount will be put to a waste, will go down the drain. And as far as I understand, Henderson Group is doing site investigation work in the area. I think they are trying to jump the gun here. Apart from the government jumping the gun here, the property developers are also moving fast, and they are already causing some nuisance and posing safety hazards. So my question for the administration is this. Now, some property developers are doing site investigation, and they're drilling holes into great depths of the ground, and then they pour concrete fill up the holes with concrete. Are they doing this, and are these moves legal? Are they in line with the town planning regulations? Now, in the paper, you said that you have consulted the rural committees. It says that they requested you to rehouse the local residents and residents of the Dill's Corner Garden and the farmers and so on. In your proposed tender, the Home of Loving Faithfulness will be recited, and this is a residential home for the handicapped people. Now, in Dill Corner Garden, over 1,000 elderly people live there. And it is said that arrangements will be made for them, but I don't see any specific arrangements set out here. Can you be clearer on that point? Some villages may have to be relocated altogether. Is it possible? And even more residents are demanding no demolition, no removal. I hope that their life of the way of living can be maintained. So can you address to the several questions I raised? Undersecretary, please. Thank you, Dr. Zhang, for your questions. Let me explain further. For the NENT, we will provide 60,000 units, 60% of will be public housing. And in the advanced works, 16,000 new flats will be provided, and 13,000 of them will be public housing flats. So I think this is good to the community and is satisfying public housing demands. As we all know, housing is in short supply in Hong Kong. Now, you talk about on private land, there are some site investigation works. Well, we only learned about this from the media this morning, so we'll go back and take a look whether the proper procedures have been adhered to. Now, as for residents in the Dill's Corner Garden, we understand that the needs of those elderly affected, and we work together with the SWD. And under existing policies, those affected and they are living in subsidized RCH RCHEs, they will be allocated to places in other non-subsidized RCHEs. Now, for those RCHE non-subsidized, if they have difficulties in seeking a place, SWD colleagues are more than happy to help them to locate a suitable place. Now, as for the demand on no demolition, no removal, earlier on the administration had said clearly that we would not be acceding to this request. This is for the good of the entire community. We need housing, and we have to strike a right balance here. Thank you, Chairman. Next one, Mr. Gary Fan. Thank you, Chairman. From day one, when the government wishes to implement NENT projects, I have been very critical on these projects. I think this is based on false presumptions or inaccurate presumptions. 2 days ago, a land concern group spent a lot of time to retrieve records of the Town Planning Board in the past 10 years. Since 2004, they used 90 hectares of land of building residential buildings and also hotels, because there is an influx of travelers from the mainland, and some tenement buildings have been turned into guest houses illegally. But then the CE said that we are lacking housing, and this is a false statement, and I don't believe that the NENT project should proceed. And the Town Planning Board procedures have just been completed, and the results are yet to be announced. And now you're coming to the LegCo to seek a funding of $340 million. So this is obviously jumping the gun, and this is going against procedural justice. You must address this question. Also, the administration stressed that the NENT project is a new town development project, but in effect what you are doing is you're trying to split up the whole project into smaller projects.
You unnecessarily form sites and even impact on these NGO-operated RCHEs. You're actually eating into the rural areas. You want to create a fait accompli so as to proceed with your bulldozer type of policies. This is not in the interest of Hong Kong people. Before we received this paper, the Complaints Division of the LegCo already referred to us the submissions from the residents of the Dose Corner Garden. Like the farmers and villagers there, they don't want any removal or demolition. But the government is jumping the gun, intending to create a situation of fait accompli. The Kutong villagers are saying that Henderson is being unscrupulous. It has been stealthily drilling these holes into their land. Now the government is using the Town Planning Board procedures to jump the gun. These land developers have disregarded Hong Kong's laws. The only remaining farmland in Hong Kong are being affected by them because they are conducting investigation on these sites. Mr. Ma, you said you only learned this today. Please, after the meeting, try to understand with the villagers sitting in at this meeting to see how procedural justice can be observed. So I do not support the proposals in the paper. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Fan, on overall land users, we have to balance the needs of all sectors of the community. For commercial sites, residential sites, and other land users, we are sure that we need to strike a balance. As for procedures, Town Planning Board procedures, all along the government has adhered to the same approach for public works projects. I cited 4 examples just now, and we're not deviating from that principle. We have a pressing timetable. As Mr. Wong explained, we need about 4 years' time to do detailed design and investigation, site investigation. So I hope that members can understand that we have been adhering to the procedures. Mr. Chen Hanpan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also feel that the government is very eager to do something. In the paper, particularly from the enclosures, we understand more the situation of the Dose Corner Garden with over 1,000 odd elders. It said that if necessary, the SWD can refer them to other RCHEs. But usually, the family members of these residents are nearby. Well, if they are living in North District, are you going to refer them to somewhere in Southern District, to the elders? That would be very remote. And last Sunday, they organized an activity. I went to Dose Corner Garden. Some elders held my hand and told me that they're very worried. They did not know where they would be moved to. They're worried that they would be separated from their partners and peers. We're talking about 40 hectares of land in Tung. Do we have space to accommodate these elders? I hope that in handling this case, the government should not act hastily. Do not adopt the normal procedures, because you're talking about relocating 1,000 odd elders. They've been living there happily for a long time. I don't want this case to turn into an elderly abuse case. So please re-examine the elderly home in Dose Corner Garden. Should it be retained or redeveloped? And I'm going to move a motion. Under Secretary, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chan, I think the government is also eager to meet the demands and needs of residents. The Development Bureau, together with the SWD, had met with the representatives of the home to explain in detail the Tung North Development Plan. The SWD will continue to liaise with the affected elderly homes, including that in Dose Corner Garden, so as to minimize the impact on them. I hope members will understand that we're actively discussing this with the relevant policy bureaus. We would be compassionate, reasonable, and lawful in suitably caring for the affected persons. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to have more information. You said you try to understand the situation with other departments and work out future developments. Were you saying that you're going to move the elders to somewhere else? These elders want to have in situ rehousing. So, even if in future Northeast NT is to be developed, there is still a need for elderly homes, RCHEs. So can you reserve land for that purpose? Can you have, say, a so-called elderly estate? Can you give me an answer today? Mr. Chan, at this stage, we won't rule out anything. We'll actively consider your proposal with the SWD. I'll, of course, relay your proposal to the SWD colleagues. Next, Mr. Chan Kam Lam. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the development area, certain residents will be affected. We must consider their needs and take care of them. Just now, elderly homes were mentioned. In the development process, the Bureau must consider how to rehouse the affected elders. If you do not consider their needs, it would not be proper. In the paper, it is said that works would commence in August 2014 to be completed in 2020. But some housing works will see the first population intake in 2018. What about site investigation and planning? Will you proceed in phase? And what if there is slippage? How will you handle the affected residents, rehousing, etc., etc.? What timetable do you have? Otherwise, the whole project may be delayed. May I have your views? Under Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chen. Can I defer to Mr. Wong? Mr. Chairman, this funding application is for detailed design and site investigation. After we've obtained funds, we hope that in the third quarter of 2014, we can proceed with the detailed design and relevant site investigation. We have to go through statutory procedures, gazetto, land resumption, and so forth. Soonest, by early 2018, with funding approval, we can start site formation and infrastructure works. To match with the public housing production timetable, we'll farm land for that purpose. In 2019-2020, individual sites can be handed over to the Housing Department for the construction of subsidized housing units. So according to that timetable, the first popular intake would be in 2023. So that's our timetable. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Chairman, is it possible to compress that timetable? Can you complete your investigation work earlier? Because just now you told us that you would only be able to complete the housing units in 2023. 10 years' time, you're talking about 10 years' time. Can you advance the whole timetable? Under Secretary or Director? Mr. Chairman, we understand very clearly the situation. We'll try as far as possible to compress the timetable so as to have the first population intake into the new town as early as possible. But we have to observe certain statutory procedures like land acquisition, gazetto, and so forth. We must complete all statutory procedures before we do land formation. As for Kutong North, we lately discovered certain toxic substances which have to be cleared first. So the expected land formation time would be longer because we have to treat the soil first before we can do land formation. So crucial issues have to be ironed out first. I'm afraid the target date for the first population intake, namely 2023, should be the soonest. Of course, phase by phase, we'll see whether there's room for further expedition. Mr. Yu Si-wei? Thank you, Chairman. Now we all know that Hong Kong's housing problem is quite serious. Therefore, it is necessary for the government to identify land sites. So I personally support the funding proposal here. I have a similar question as Mr. Chan. Why it should take 6 years to do detailed design and site investigation? The government mentioned gazetto and other tasks. should you write your paper in a clearer manner? Otherwise, we'll ask why it should take 6 years to complete so little work. I think members should have more details. I think Chen Hanpan's question is very proper. For rehousing the elders in Dill's Corner Garden and Hof, the government has actually decided to move these elders. I think the government should listen to district opinion more. They should be more people-oriented in their approach. They should consider in situ rehousing. Don't just tell the elders that they are going to move. Otherwise, they'll be very worried. They are aged, so they're worried. I think you should discuss with them before making a decision, and your decision should be objective after consulting different sectors of the community. Undersecretary. Thank you, Mr. Yu. Thank you very much for understanding the acute shortage of housing units in Hong Kong. Mr. Wong can elaborate if necessary. Concerning the rehousing of the elders in Dill's Corner Garden and Hof, we've heard members' views. At this juncture of time, with no intention to exclude any possibilities, so we'll see how we can minimize the impact on these elders. Well, before we conclude, we have to handle a motion. I was just notified by Mr. Chen Hanpan that he intended to move a motion. Do I need to read out the motion? Clerk, Mr. Chen Hanpan's motion is to request the government to reserve or rehouse the elderly home in Dill's Corner Garden. The motion has already been tabled. What about the wording of the motion? The clerk has already read out the motion. I am of the view that the motion is directly related to the discussion item. Members, do you agree that we should handle this motion at this meeting? Do you agree? Agree? So we'll handle this motion later. Let's continue with this item. Ms. Alice Mack. Mr. Chairman, the paper mentions the rehousing arrangements for the elderly at Dill's Corner Garden. I also move a motion. The FTU mentioned a number of times that it is not necessary to remove the elderly home. The elderly home can actually be retained. I wonder whether the Bureau will consider the options proposed by us. The elderly home has a long history, and many of the elders have been staying there for a long, long time. And through the Mainland Liaison Center, the FTU has brought many of these elders back to Hong Kong. So I'd like the Bureau to consider the options submitted to you. And then in the development area, there are these food factories. Who will answer? Who will answer? Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank Ms. Alice Mack for her views. As for Dill's Corner Garden, as the Undersecretary mentioned, at this juncture, together with the Labour and Welfare Bureau and the SWD, we're actively considering a number of possibilities. At this stage, we won't rule out any possibilities. As for the elderly home at Doe's Corner Garden, it will be in the town center to the south of the Kutong Station in future. When the engineering works in the development area proceed, there will be an impact on the elderly home if it is to stay there. We'll further discuss with the Labour and Welfare Bureau and the SWD to see whether we can have a solution that is acceptable to all. Mr. Chan Chi-chun, Mr. Chairman, the proposals are closely related to one another. Mr. Y mentioned engineering expenses. He said that none of the works project should be delayed, otherwise construction costs will rise. So they are warning us, well, you have to approve our funding proposal. Otherwise, if the expenditure is to rise, it will be your responsibility. But the consultation period will take longer. Who should bear the responsibility then? It's because the government has been messing up this consultation exercise. This happened to Northeast NT. Is it a mistake on the part of councillors or the government? Mr. Thomas Chow went for funding, but most of the proposals were for Northeast NT. We said he was jumping the gun. For this item, he's not here because he's the chairman of the Town Planning Board, and then he sent the undersecretary. Of course, the undersecretary will not admit that he's jumping the gun. Mr. Chan Hak Ken asked you a question. Probably you colluded with Mr. Chan. In response, you cited a whole series of examples. I'd like to ask whether the Town Planning Board received opposing views on those cases. Now they're trying to regularize this jumping the gun approach. That is, they will implement first before scrutiny. They'd like to bypass the Town Planning Board. Well, paragraph 14 of the paper is very clear. You say that these technical preparations will be proceeded in parallel with other implementation steps in line with the usual arrangements for works projects. Your final sentence says that there will be a much more prolonged time frame for implementation. I accompanied the villagers in sending their submissions. 40,000 odd views, 90% in opposition. You are now asking us for money so that you can start work. Dr. Fernando Chung said that if you don't get approval from the Town Planning Board, the money will go down the drain. So you are now trying to exert pressure on the Town Planning Board. You are going to tell the TPB that the LegCo has already approved your funding proposal. But let me tell you, the TPB won't veto you. It's just like the Central Wan Chai reclamation. The villagers have a slogan. They say that the government is an accomplice. But no, the government is the culprit. It is the mastermind. It is actually leading the land developers astray. Of course, if the site affects their own homes, that's different. Now, with this particular project, the government is actually influencing the business sector, which will follow suit. Are you going to tell us to turn a blind eye to all these issues and then approve your proposals?
You should conduct proper consultation, but you refuse to do that. In that case, you should follow the procedure. And you've heard the objecting voices, you've heard that, but you still proceed. Anyway, I think you've used up all your time, Mr. Chan. Nick, Mr. Wuchiwai. Thank you. I think in the planning for the development of NT Northeast, I think we've heard a lot about the question relating to agricultural policy. The government has always refused to listen to members' views. That is, the government should resume some of the agricultural land. You say in Kutong North, you say that some land could be made available for farming. That is in the outline zoning plan, you stipulated the site can only be used for agricultural purpose. However, if the landowner of the site concerned may not have any connection with the tenant, and you never know whether or not the landlord would like to lease the site to the farmers, and you don't know how the landlord will deal with the land that he owns. And we also worry that this so-called agricultural policy is only a gesture, as in the case of the Choi Yun village. After they have been relocated, they will need to obtain land from the landlords to resume farming, and they're encountering all kinds of difficulties. Many people have come to attend our meeting today, and they pointed out the government never seriously considered how it could resolve this problem. If you still ask the villagers to move to Kutong North to resume farming, how will they accept that? They have to beg the landowners for land, and then they have to suffer from one landowner, Henderson Land, and then beg another landowner, and they don't know where eventually they will be able to settle. In the paper prepared by our secretariat, it is pointed out that the government would only say that it will resume a piece of land to develop the agricultural policy so that the affected farmers can really have land that they can resume farming. I think that is more compatible with the interests of our society, and also help resolve the contradictions in the course of planning. But according to your paper, and apparently you've not considered this seriously. So I'd like to ask whether or not you will accept this suggestion, so that your planning for the NT Northeast and all development projects in the NT, this would become a solution to the problem faced by the farmers in the NT, that is, they need land to continue with the farming. Deputy Secretary, thank you for the question. Mr. Chen Chi-chun mentioned the town planning procedure. I'd like to reiterate that we are following the usual procedure. The two are proceeding in parallel. We are now applying funding for the advanced works. Please be quiet. Those in the public gallery, please remain quiet. I hope, Chairman, you can remind those in the public gallery to remain quiet so that our proceedings can be conducted smoothly. Otherwise, you may need to ask them to leave.
Please
observe silence, otherwise we may need to ask you to leave. Please carry on. Coming back to our agricultural policy, the government will have a special, resumption of farming plan to help the genuine farmers to resume their farming. The FCD will approach the landowners in Kutong South and who are willing to lease or sell some of the land that they own to people who are interested in resuming farming. The government will continue offering short-term tenancies on government land and lease them to the affected persons. During this time, as I said, our funding application is for funding for the advanced works. Basically, it's the detailed design and site investigation. the work will only start in 2018. Between now and 2018, there is room for us to for the AFCD and the Food and Environmental Bureau to explore all possible options. Chairman, I don't think the government has a credible, resumption of farming policy. So if you develop anti-northeast and hong shui kill, I think you're certainly going to encounter many difficulties and obstacles. We've just received a notice from Mr. Gary Fan that he intends to move a motion to amend Mr. Chen Heng-ban's motion. Could the Secretary please read this out? Mr. Gary Fan's amendment is as follows. We will urge the government to retain those Corners Garden residential homes for the elderly. I think the motive for the two motions are good, but my only concern is that those corner garden home, I think we've approached them several times, and like the villagers in Northeast, they insist that there should be no relocation or demolition. So I'm worried that the government will still proceed with the development of anti-Northeast, and that's why, together with Ms. Chen Chi-chun, I'm proposing this amendment, taking out the words or, rehousing. And I hope members will understand that the senior citizens living in the residential home for the elderly at those corner garden, I don't think we should set a precedent so that the government can proceed with the development for anti-Northeast. Well, I think we can continue with the discussion and deal with the motions later on. Mr. Chen Kin-po, I support the advanced work for the development of anti-Northeast. I think the project should start as soon as possible. Many members ask questions regarding those Corners Garden, and if the residents refuse to move, the site in question will be affected when all the works begin. So I'd like to ask whether or not you would consider this. That is, if you intend to relocate them, you should tell them that the new environment they will move to will be even better than where they are. Would you, do this in order that they can voluntarily move out? Because the site in question will become the town center of the new development area. So could you explain this and come up with some incentives to encourage them to accept rehousing or relocation? Thank you, Mr. Chan. We do not have any concrete option at the moment. Once we have such an option, we'll be happy to share that with members. In the absence of a concrete option, but we hope that later on, after we have had more information from the SWD, we'll be happy to provide such information to members. Mr. Frederick Fung, thank you. I also like to comment on the motion. I've been to the Dill's Corner Garden homes for the elderly a couple of times, and they've also come to lodge complaint to this council. I think first of all, I'd like to point out the government stance is that once they made the announcement, there is no other option but relocation. We've talked to the officials, and they seem to say, the officials are saying that there's no compromise. The government will proceed with the development of anti-Northeast. When would the citizens be move out? They don't know. Where would they be rehoused? They don't know. It would depend on the SWD. And all these sounds really are worrying, because you've identified the site you want to, demolish the home, and you don't have an alternative site for them yet. I think the site in question is really suitable for the senior citizens to live in, because the air quality is there, it is good, and also it's the structure is only 2 or 3 stories tall, and you have volunteers serving and helping these senior citizens, and so it's really like, I wouldn't say it's like paradise for the senior citizens, but it's really a very good place for the elderly to stay. But now you're really scaring the senior citizens, and they're really worried. I think I went there last Saturday or Sunday, and I found that the residents there are really very worried. So are the families. So I hope the government will not do this. I think you should first consult them. You should tell these people how you plan to, rehouse them. If they're living in such an environment, could you offer them a comparable environment so that to move to? And can you treat the other villages in North East in the same manner? Thank you, Mr. Fong. I think you all know that we understand the residents at Dale's Corners Garden and the situation in that homes for the elderly. Our secretary has actually gone to the Dale's Corner Garden homes for the elderly. The advanced work and the funding application we're making, I think we're talking about 2014 and 2018. So we still have 4 more years, during which time, together with our colleagues at SWD, we'll see whether we can come up with a better option. Please understand that we still have a few more years. You don't even have an option, and you're already telling these people that the homes will need to be demolished. So you're sentencing people to death. You're just telling them to wait for the turn, to die. Do you know that? Or you want to demolish the homes? You have to tell them what is their prospect. It's even more horrifying than telling these people that they will be killed tomorrow, and they have to worry for a few years. I think that prospect is even more cruel. We understand that. We will talk to our colleagues at the SW as soon as possible. As I said, we've been in close contact with the home all along. Do you know that more than 1,000 senior citizens live there? Is there any other home that can accommodate more than 1,000 senior citizens? I don't think the ASWD can resolve the problem. Are you giving us the guarantee that you can do that? Can the senior citizens go to your place to stay in future? Okay, I will now deal with our second round of questions. Dr. Fernando Zhang and Mr. Chen Hangban, 3 minutes each. Dr. Zhang. Thank you. I think the development of Northeast. We're not saying that categorically that there shouldn't be any development at all, but development should be, based on the land that is currently available, and also the industrial and commercial facilities, and we have to consider the residents' network in the area. You're treating them in the abstract. You act like a bulldozer. You want to demolish everything and plan everything from scratch. So it's a top-down approach, and you're simply imposing this onto the residents. And I don't think this is acceptable. If you want to have this development, fine. There are lots of land which has been contaminated, or there might be areas which could be developed if you so that you can enhance the environment and improve the living environment. Nobody will object to that, but eventually you're going to demolish everything, and you are picking the easy targets, the vulnerable ones, the non-indigenous residents, senior citizens living in these private residential homes for the elderly, and they simply cannot complain. So I'd like to ask whether you have this consideration, that is for the farmers affected. I think they should be offered an alternative site to resume their farming. And in the event of a village, will you be able to relocate an entire village for homes for the elderly? Would you consider the option of in situ relocation instead of simply imposing everything onto the affected persons? All along we have been maintaining close contact with the stakeholders. Members should understand that we need to be consider public interest and come up with an option, and that is something we'll continue to do. We don't have an answer for the time being, but Chairman, in the absence of an answer, they're still saying that they would still like to proceed with the works. They are now applying for funding for the advanced work, and then site investigation, and then town planning procedure will begin at the same time. On the one hand, they're jumping the gun. On the other hand, they're telling everybody, including the affected persons, that there's no other option. They're coming, then they will demolish the whole place. So what are the residents to do? Oh, this is unreasonable, Chairman. Especially you, Chairman, you should try to defend the interests of these people, especially we're talking about the NT. So regarding Mr. Chen Hung Ban's motion, I'd like to add 2 more words to his motion. That's add the word in situ relocation. So are you moving another amendment? Okay. Next, Mr. Chen Hung Ban. Thank you. I will not comment on the amendments proposed by other members. That would be a decision for members to make. But I agree with Mr. Chen Kim Bo. That is, when work starts in Kutong North, and if the environment becomes very, very poor, then the residents living in the area will be affected. So could you move the home to somewhere in its proximity, or would you build another residential home for these affected tenants? So I think we could have more flexibility in dealing with this problem. I therefore hope that members will consider my suggestion.
No.
Under Secretary, would you consider that point? We will definitely consider Mr. Chan's suggestion. We will not rule out any type of proposals. The next one. Perhaps we'll adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes. Let's take a break for 5 minutes. Dr. Fernando Cheung would like to make an amendment to Mr. Chen Hanban's motion, and we need some time to deal with this. Perhaps you can take a break for 15 minutes. Do you agree? Well, do you agree that the item on greening master plans be deferred to the next meeting? Well, let's take a break for 5 minutes first, and then we will come back for discussion after that.
觀眾好，唔好意思，複雜問題，我相信大家都忍得嘅。
And now, I will resume the meeting. First of all, we will deal with the amendment motion tabled by Mr. Gary Fan, and if it is endorsed, then we will not deal with the other amendment motions. So shall we read out the motion tabled by Mr. Fan? No? No need. Well, in terms of the timing, shouldn't we deal with Dr. Fernando Jones first, and then Gary Fans and myself, and then the last one, Mr. Chen Han-pang? Now, in terms of the content, because Mr. Fans, your motion is narrower in scope. So if we deal with yours first, we are ruling out the possibility of Dr. Fernando Jones' motion getting passed. So those who are in favor of Mr. Gary Fan's motion, please raise your hand. 3 are 4 members. Those against? Nine against. 4. Now we'll deal with then the amendment motion tabled by Fernando Zheng. I'll request a claim of division. No need to ring the bell. We'll just record it. For those 4, please raise your hand. Those for Mr. Gary Fan's motion, please raise your hand. Well, let's read out the names. It will be all right if we just read out the names. Clerk, please. 4. Gary Fan, Chen Chi-chun, Frederick Fung, and Fernando Zhang. Those against, read out the names, please. Those who are against, please raise your hand. Those who are against Mr. Gary Fan's amendment motion, Dr. Lo Wai Kwa, UC Wing, Chen Kam Lam, Chen Hak Ken, Alice Mack, An Chong, Yip Kwok Him, Chen Kim Po, and Chen Han-pang. Right? Now we're going to deal with the amendment motion moved by Dr. Fernando Zheng. Mr. Zheng claims division. Those for the amendment motion, please raise your hand. 3, 4 altogether. Fan Kwok Wai, Chen Chi-chun, Frederick Fung, and Dr. Fernando Zheng. Those against, please raise your hand. Those who are against Dr. Fernando Zheng's amendment motion, Lo Wai Kwa, UC Wing, Chen Kam Lam, Chen Hak Ken, Alice Mack, An Chong, Yip Kwok Him, Chen Kim Po, and Chen Han-pang. So now let's deal with the motion moved by Mr. Chen Han-pang and seconded by Mr. Chen Hak Ken. Those for, again, please raise your hand for the motion. Do you need to claim a division? Yes. 4. Lo Wai Kwok, Fernando Zhang, Fung Kim K, UC Wing, Chen Kam Lam, Chen Hak Ken, Alice Mack, An Chong, Yip Kwok Him, Chen Kim Po, and Chen Han-pang. Is that correct? Anyone against? No. So the motion moved by Mr. Chen Han-pang is endorsed. So much for this agenda item. I abstained. Please jot that down, please. Sorry. So much for this agenda item. So do members support that the proposal in the paper be submitted to the Public Works Subcommittee for endorsement. Those for, please raise your hand. For the Vice Chairman, Low Wai Kwok, Yu Si Wing, Chen Kam Lam, Chen Hak Ken, En Chong, Yip Kwok Him, Chen Kim Po, and Chen Han Pen. And those against, please raise your hand. Against, Gary Fan, Raymond Chen, Frederick Fong, and Fernando Zhang. Abstention? None. So those who support it are in the majority. So you support that the proposal be submitted to the PWSC for consideration. There is another agenda item on the greening master plans in the NT. Now, if you want to discuss it, then we'll have to extend the meeting time. If not, then that will be deferred for the next meeting. Okay, let's save that for the next meeting then. Let's arrange another time for them. AOB? None? I'll declare the meeting adjourned. The clerk will notify you of the agenda items for the next meeting. Thank you very much.